Okay. I'm going to call this meeting of the City Council work session for September 24th to order. If you would call the roll, please.
Kaiser.
Present.
Anderson.
Likewise.
Nanke.
Here.
McCoy.
Here.
Osik.
Here.
Hoy.
Here.
Cook.
Here.
Lewis.
Here.
And Bennett.
Here. All right, thank you. Doesn't look like we have any additions or deletions, so we'll just go right into the master plan, Patricia.
All right, good evening. My name is Patricia Farrell. I'm the Parks and Natural Resource Planning Manager, and I'm here tonight to present to you the draft master plan for Riverfront Park. So master plans are intended to last for about 20 years to guide development over a long period of time. The last one was done in 2001. Since then, we've had several major happenings. We had the 4-acre parcel that was acquired in 2015, and also the Peter Courtney Minto Island Bridge was opened in 2017. So those two alone warranted another look at the master plan, as well as also there's a proposed carousel addition and of course the new performance area and covered stage. So this last part of the slide shows the outreach that we have conducted. We've had 3 public meetings. The last one was just this last week. And we've had 2 community surveys where we had over 1,600 people participate in the surveys and give us their feedback. We also had 3 focus group meetings, and these were with people who run events or nonprofit groups that use the park for a lot of annual gatherings. We also then developed 3 conceptual plans based on the feedback that we got, and I'll go through this in more detail in some of the other slides. Then we also refined the location of the performance area, and we now have the draft master plan that consolidates a lot of the comments that we got and also the new proposed location for the covered stage and performance area. So where we are now is at the work session, and then it will go to the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board at their next meeting in October, and then we'll come back to you at City Council in November. So the first thing that we asked, and in the first public meeting, was really to get people's vision of the park and what they like about it and what things are concerned about. So one of the main things that we kept hearing was people love that it's open, that there's lots of room to bike, and the big open meadows, people really appreciated that there was location now, and all this connectivity with the 2 bridges was very important, and also that people liked the activities and the amenities that are offered there, and people said more of the same, basically. But they also had concerns, and that was, a lot of the ideas would cut into the open space. That was of concern. People obviously were very concerned about parking. That was a recurring theme, more parking. And then public safety, mostly that was related to crossing of Front Street, which wasn't really part of the scope of the master plan. We did try to work closely with the downtown streetscape project that was also going on so that we could have some continuity between those two efforts. And then when we asked people, what would you like to see in the park in the future? They said bathrooms, shade, better connections to the Willamette River, and more parking. So in between the second and the third public meeting, we had 3 conceptual plans, and then we started looking at some of the details of some of the elements that people liked. And in particular, we started looking at the proposed location of the covered stage and the new amphitheater. And part of the problem was that the Willamette Greenway overlay extends along the whole edge of the park, from the top of the bank, from ordinary high water of the river. And the Willamette Greenway is a statewide planning goal as well as our own code, Chapter 600. And the goal of that is to protect the views both from the river and to the river. And so when we were looking at the covered stage and how that would work in that location of the existing amphitheater, without impacting the greenway, it really did not work because it really pushed the seating such that we would have less seating than there is now, which doesn't seem to make sense. Or we would have to move it such that it would impact the existing playground, which we also didn't want to do. So the proposal is to move it to the 4-acre site, and this graphic at the bottom, and I'll show you a larger version of that in a minute, but the proposal is to move it to that 4-acre site. And the The reason that we like this location is that it really takes full advantage of that property. It also moves it away from the river, so it's out of the greenway, so it doesn't have those greenway compatibility issues. And it allows for a more separation of use, so that if that area is in use, it could be closed off for an event, for instance, and there would still be full public access to and fro the bridge and also along the main promenade along the river. So it also allowed for more capacity for seating and pretty much kept all the views to the river more open. So that was the reason why we are proposing to move it to that location. So some of the key elements that were very popular through the different conceptual plans that we are including in the master plan. Green space, so we're adding the new open space, the new amphitheater lawn. It'll be a sloping lawn down to it. I'll show you some other of the features that will add some different performance areas. People wanted to increase river access and recreation opportunities, so we're showing an expanded dock and also a floating boardwalk that was very popular in the plans. We're also showing a new multi-use path and some new plazas for other gatherings. We are showing an expanded parking. There will be 55 to 60 new spots in the south parking lot that will also go into the new property. And we have restrooms now being in the north and the south. The existing amphitheater will stay and it will be enhanced, and so it will be able to be used for other events as well. And then we added some more shade. That was one of the things people wanted. So we've added some strategically placed trees and some structures, and I'll show you where those locations are so that when people are at the playground or at the existing amphitheater, they could be out there in the rain or in the summer, and it would have some protection. And then also we're looking at these, what we're calling gateway elements at the 4 locations where you can have access into the park. We're showing some sort of structure or visual enhancement, because a lot of the comments that came were from people from the downtown streetscape was, we don't know that the park is even there. We don't see how to get across the front street. We don't see a connection. So we were talking about, well, what can we do to kind of make a visual tie-in from downtown to these 4 new locations to get into the park. And then we're also going to enhance the Willamette River riparian area with more native plantings. And some of that work has already started because a lot of the blackberries have already been taken out along there. So this is an overview of the whole master plan, and you have a graphic of that on your tables. And I'm going to go through in detail some of the blow-ups of these areas because it's a little bit hard to read. But we're showing kind of ghosted in the area. So we're showing the seasonal, we're just calling it a seasonal facility here where the ice rink is. And then we're showing a ghosted in area for the carousel expansion, even though that is not vetted yet, and it needs to go through its own vetting and outreach process before that's included. But we wanted to keep it there as a placeholder so we didn't have to amend the master plan too soon. So I'm just going to go through some of the detail areas now, kind of starting from, so north is to the right here, and so we're looking at the plan view, and I'm going to start from the south end and work our way up.
Patricia, on
Yes.
this, do you want comments on each of these major elements, or do you want us to wait till the end to talk to you or question you, or?
How about you wait till the end?
Okay.
Okay, so at the south end, so the main elements, the covered stage. Behind the covered stage, there is going to be a river overlook, and you can see some precedent images down at the bottom. So it might look something like this or like this, where it's a rail, seating at a rail. It would have a view out to the bridge, be in line with the bridge. Number 3 is a new restroom. 4 is the new access way that will eventually happen along Pringle Creek, and that will have one of those gateway elements I was talking about, and it also will have kind of an entry plaza down here. 5 is a, five is a very future connection across Pringle that we are hoping will happen in the future. And then 6 is what we're calling an arrival plaza. This will be a spot where large vehicles who are servicing the performance area could access, but it would also be a spot where you could have other events there. For instance, food carts or another wholly separate event. Expanded parking down here in 7. 8 is the enhanced amphitheater, showing some trees in it, and I'll have a better view of that in the next one. And then the floating river boardwalk.
Bonsai, is that what you're telling me?
Okay, here's the middle area. So this is the arrival plaza, again here, showing it, for instance, with some sort of tent set up for a fair, for instance, expanded parking. Here's the playground, and what we're proposing is we would expand and enhance the playground. A lot of people were very interested in having a nature play area, and so this would incorporate things like climbing rocks and logs and what's called a at-grade slide. So it's there's an image, kind of hard to see, but it's a mound. Basically, you berm it up, and kids just go up the mound and slide down it. So there's no ladder involved. And then there would be shade here so that people could watch their kids and be in the shade. Existing restrooms stay. The existing amphitheater stays. We would just leave all the structures in place. We would add some trees to provide shade from the south. And then these are some shade structures along the upper edge where you could have picnic tables underneath. Here's a precedent image down here. And so that in the winter, people could use them as well, and you could be sitting outside. The other thing we added, which is kind of an age-friendly addition, is a paving pattern that would be in the form of a labyrinth, so people can walk that. It's fun for kids and adults. And then, of course, the floating boardwalk here again. So at the north end, the North Meadow area, the additions here would be a Court Street entry plaza, and again, a gateway element so that people could see it. This is the main, kind of the main focus entrance, so you could have a gathering area, you could have a pergola like this one with a seating wall. Splash pad fountain stays the same, the Rotary Pavilion stays the same, new bathrooms. Expanded dock area that would also be associated with a potential vendor's kiosk for rentals. People were very excited about having the potential to rent a kayak or a paddle board or a canoe and take it and go up the slough or explore on their own, but not necessarily have to own one, and they could just rent it at the top and walk down to the bottom and pick it up and go. We also talked about having what we're calling a festival street. So this is the existing turnaround. It would just be an overlay on the pavement to designate it differently from the parking lot. And it wouldn't affect the parking at all, but it could be another spot where people could have another event, like set up a craft fair or some other kind of event as a separate space. And then there's the holiday tree there as well. So those are kind of the details of some of those areas. So as I mentioned, after this meeting, we'll go to SPRAB, a Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and we'll receive public comment there as well. And there's also, it's still up on the website so people can comment on our online form. And there's a couple of private initiatives, one of which is the Rotary Covered Stage, and they will be doing the fundraising for the covered stage portion once the master plan is approved. And then also I mentioned the carousel. They want to do what's called an annex, which is a separate process. So that's my presentation. So now I'll open it up to questions.
Okay, Councilor Lewis.
Well, I have several, but I'll start with two. On the very north end, as you walk across the old railroad bridge and come into the park,
Yes.
there used to be trees on the west side. They were all taken out to widen the sidewalk, and now this is showing trees. Are they all on the south side, or excuse me, the east side? Or are we thinking about replanting the trees that we just took down?
So are you talking about the Union Street entrance right here?
Right, and
Well, we'll certainly plant trees if there's room to plant trees. We're showing a plaza there, and there's going to be one of the bicycle rental locations there. So if there's room along that sidewalk, I know they took some down along the walkway because there was kind of a double layer, and they were kind of impinging on each other.
Yeah, actually, if I'm not mistaken, and I walk there just about every day, all of the trees that were on the west side of that walkway, all the way to what will be the new event, or the 24, what's that, Festival Street, all of those trees were taken out and replaced by bricks. And I believe the reason was that to widen the sidewalk, so it's being used more and more and it accommodate the pedestrians and bicyclists. So the only thing I can think of is that these trees are, if they're going to be this many, they must be on the east side of that street.
Yeah, because I know they took those out because they were impinging on the trees that were on the west side of the sidewalk as well. So that might be overambitious as far as the number of trees that are being shown there.
And then one other question, if I could. We've had, if I'm not mistaken, we've used this, what's depicted here as number 7, that little concrete circle. We've had concerts there before. I know that's where we staged the grand opening of the bridge. Is that, that area where we used to have concerts, I'm curious what the capacity was there, because we used to have them there, and what the capacity will be of the new stage area where people can be. I'm just trying to see, are we increasing the size or are we decreasing it?
So I believe, it varies a lot with how people set up their blankets and their chairs. But I think the existing one is about 2,000, and the proposed one is around 5,000. But it really is dependent on, how much space people take up. So yes, we are increasing the capacity in the new one.
Okay. Good, thanks.
I had a question on the existing amphitheater.
Yes.
And I don't want to, I want to understand what appears to me in looking at this, the conflict between vistas and views and the visibility of the bridge and the placement of trees. I'm kind of concerned, well, not even kind of, I'm very concerned. I walk this park every day. And particularly in this area around that, the existing amphitheater, and I'm trying to figure out how those trees improve the vista. Because what I notice people doing there is not using it so much for concerts as it's a sun trap during the summer and a way to see Minto Brown, the bridge, the Echo Earth. And now I'm going to have trees in my way. How do those two goals fit together?
Well, hopefully the trees are going to be positioned so that it's not going to block your views, or it will be so minor because they'll be staggered. So we'll definitely take that into account of the placement. The intent was to try to give some shade for those people who don't want to be.
We have quite a bit of shade out there now, but there are places in Oregon, maybe it's just me. I'm from Eastern Washington originally, but I've been here over 50 years. I live for these sunny days and love to have a chance to be in the sun. I'm not sure what shade means, what views mean, kind of what are we after in that area, because that is the view of the bridge right there.
So,
If you want a really grand view of the bridge and Minto Island, it is in that particular location.
okay, so perhaps some of these trees, so you have the tiers, the concrete areas that
I
the
can't see
view
'em through the
changes
trees,
as you
hardly.
go up those, right?
Yeah.
And then when the trees get taller, it'll be the trunk that hopefully you'll be kind of seeing between, and the canopies up above you.
Well, let me assure you, trees are growing now along the river edge. They're lovely cottonwoods. For some reason, that tree is the favorite tree down there that block your view. They don't really add to the ambiance of the place, and I'm concerned that we're going to end up with a similar kind of problem. I'll just share that with you. I think when people said they want a view, they honestly meant we like the open space, we like some of the vista, and they like shaded areas. They want a mix, but I'm afraid you're moving in favor of shade over the vista. I'm just concerned about those open spaces, not losing those if we can help. Mm-hmm. Councilor Anderson?
Thank you. I guess this is just a response. I can see.
I'm not debating you.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no.
telling her my views.
All I was going to say was, I think the raised vista behind the stage might have been some sort of response to people's wanting open views. you know, the.
Yeah, that will provide a new view
Okay.
that
Yeah.
isn't currently
Yeah. No,
available.
I
A
can-
second view.
Right, I can
Yeah.
understand your concerns about that.
I just
yeah.
am worried when you look at this and you see people saying, we like open space, we like the view. We've been able to save the meadow from all kinds of people trying to get in there. Originally hotels and restaurants and all the rest of it. And I worry that in a feeling of trying to deal with one issue, we lose this broader issue of that really appreciation of the river and the views, the ability to watch the osprey and the cranes, all the herons and all the rest of it. I'm just a little concerned about it. I want to share that with you.
So are the trees that you're particularly concerned about, the trees that are in the amphitheater?
Yeah, where you're taking the amphitheater out and putting in trees, yeah.
Okay.
That's how I see that right now.
Okay.
And maybe it's just the scale is off. Peter tells me they'll be shorter.
Well, I mean, the other option is we don't have the trees in the seating area and we just have them at the berm in the back where those that really want some shade could go, and then the rest of it's more open.
Yeah, I get more trees. I do understand it. I'm watching the vista disappear in Minto Brown. I'm watching it starting to disappear really down at Riverfront Park as trees that are almost large bushes are taking over that scenic view. I just am a little concerned. I just want to kind of just highlight that. I know you will be really cautious about it, but I think people aren't kidding when they say they like that view. Okay? Yes.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all with what you
Okay.
said, Mayor. I have a couple other comments.
Yeah, you go
Questions
ahead.
and a
I got
comment.
mine.
First one, I have to say, and I would guess that I'm looking at the Rotary people here, I think the Brita Fran's objection to the where it is, you know, maybe that was some of the reason, but I think that's a very good way to deal with the issue about the amphitheater there. Then I have a comment about number 5 and number 4, which is 5 is not in this one, Patricia, it's in, yes.
This one?
Yeah, that number 5 is really the bridge to go over to the wetlands that I think, have we purchased or we have something there?
No, that's access to the, what Mountain West calls the slough parcel.
Okay, that's what I meant, yeah, okay,
So-
good.
So that's, we have to work out the acquisition along with the acquisition of the creek
Yeah,
parcel.
yeah.
So what they have offered in the past is both come as a package. So as we were doing the master planning.
Sure,
We wanted to
that's-
show that, hey, there's an opportunity, as we work through this, it's an opportunity in the future to expand the park.
Yeah, thank you, Director Fernandez. And Director Rutherford and I don't know if I've talked to you directly, but she has talked to you about how we get to number 4. In other words, getting under the bridge at Commercial. I know that's part of the park plan.
We have not forgotten that.
Okay, so number 4 is kind of where you might come out from under Commercial Street.
Yes.
Right, and the idea that, in fact, Counselor, it's an excellent idea, and that's why we have not forgotten that.
Yeah.
When we go to do the walkway along the north side.
Yes.
Part and parcel to that project will be the connection under the Commercial Street Bridge.
Perfect, perfect.
Because you come to that private property gate and you're trapped, and we want to eliminate that trap by having that connection. And frankly, our initial analysis is that once all of the impediments are removed from the creek, it fits within the flood
Perfect.
issues.
Thank you
So,
very much. And one final comment.
Yeah.
And this relates to the entryway issues, you know, welcoming. I'm thinking now of the one at Court Street. And I've been sort of out of the loop the past couple of weeks with various work things, so I haven't followed the congestion task force, but I think one of the potential not solutions, but the potential steps that could have been taken, we're talking about whether or not you could actually still cross at Court Street or not. I'm moving the crossing down, so she's saying no, okay. But at least, you know, there's some congestion issues that might come into play there. And finally, I just want to say this is an excellent plan. I'm really pleased with it, and I'm sure it'll get even better as the public and the council talks about it some more.
Yeah, Counselor, if I may, real quick, the discussion has been on perhaps restricting the north side, the east side of the crossing, the northbound Front Street, the north crossing.
Okay.
So it's not affected by, however we end up on that doesn't affect what's happening here.
There would still be a crossing someplace, of course, it just wouldn't be two of them.
Right, and it doesn't
Okay.
change. This is
Okay.
the part of the crossing that's just in the middle,
Perfect.
and that would not
Okay.
change.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councilor
All right,
Casey.
thank you. Thanks for bringing this. Just a quick question. Do you have an estimate of the number of people who commented on the plan or came to the open houses or took the survey? Any idea?
So I know over 1,600 took the survey, and generally at the 3 open houses, we've had between 35 and 50 people attendance. And then most recently, we only had a few comments coming in now that it's been posted, the final plan has been posted. And at the last public meeting, people were very positive about the plan.
Okay, that's great. And a quick comment is, I really like that we're getting a better connection to our waterways. That's been one of my personal things, is reconnecting with the river, because we feel so separated from it, and it's this major thing in our community, but there's not a good way to engage with it, at least from the east side, but west side too. So I'm really happy to see those elements in there.
Right.
Yeah, great. Councilor Cook.
Thank you. I'm really excited about this plan, so thank you for bringing it forward tonight. And I echo what Councilor Kaser said. Super exciting to have an opportunity to engage with my family closer to the water in one of the bigger access points here in the community. I did have a question about the Willamette Greenway process and the use of the trees, to go back to what the mayor was addressing. Does putting the trees there somehow meet an element of the Willamette Greenways, that maybe doing some temporary artificial shade, something that could go up and down and not impede the view, putting in like sails like you would over a playground to sort of make...
If it could be tied, so the Willamette Greenway it's trying to restrict uses to water-dependent or water-related uses. So if it's, for instance, the overlook that we're proposing behind the stage, that could be considered river-related because you're looking at the river and it's a viewpoint for the river. Adding structures, though, it could work if it was going to be connected to an overlook, and if it was compatible with the colors. There's certain color schemes that are allowed in the Greenway, so there's a potential that things like that could take the place of trees. Obviously, trees would be allowed. We're not placing the trees in there to meet any requirement. It was more that people were interested in shade and then also the restoration of the banks.
So there are some shade alternatives then, other than trees, that would still potentially be compatible?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, great, because I know, seconding the mayor wanting to protect views, I can also relate that having children play down in these areas, slathering them up with sunscreen, putting hats on them, doing whatever we can, but still coming home
Sunburned.
very, well, or sun exhausted. It's just nice to have some cooling elements, and everything's wonderful at the park, but you're at the splash pad, you're going to the restroom, you're going to the playground, you're not necessarily, you're still staying within those elements, so it's nice even within those elements to have a sun and shade option, so that you're not wanting to stay and listen to the concert, but not having an option as far as sun and shade goes. But I understand the loss of view and want to incorporate that.
Well, and certainly temporary structures would be easier as well. You know, for an event, to put up some shade structures would definitely be okay.
Okay.
It's more the permanent type of structure in the Greenway that would have to meet the certain requirements.
All right.
On the rotary structure, the new soundstage, which is fantastic, I noticed its orientation has changed several times during this process. It seems like, I mean, it was here, it's here. On this one, its direction is toward downtown. Am I understanding how that's going to work in terms of the sound?
So it's oriented essentially the same way that the existing amphitheater is
Okay.
now.
Okay.
We are proposing to build a berm along the backside and
Okay.
trees along the backside.
What river?
So there would be some
I get this
blockage of
tree
views
thing,
there.
but my gosh.
But the idea is that would help to buffer some of the sound.
Mayor, that back row is proposed to be called the Bennett Bosque.
I'm just
So
really,
that's,
I'm really kind of, well, you know, Peter, The Fernandez Forest is what
So we looked at different alignments of the stage, and this was the one, we looked at three different alignments. And, you know, of course, you've got the residential area right here across the creek.
Right.
And then we didn't want to have it, because of the grades, this was the one that required the least amount of grading.
Okay.
Because the slope of the land is already like that, and so
Yeah.
if we flip it the other way, it increased the cost by exponential amount.
It looked like you're going to have to do a lot of fill to even get that grade.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I
okay.
mean, we have to do fill anyway because we have to cap that site,
Right.
but at least we're kind of working with the existing grade in this
Okay.
alignment.
Well, it sure looks good. I really like, personally, I like that it's incorporated with the Echo Earth as well as the bridge. I mean, that you've integrated those into kind of a package that I think will be really attractive and inviting to people. It's really a neat. Great. Good job. Anyone else?
If I may, just a second. Mayor, what we'd like to do with this master plan is it's going to SPRAB, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. We're going to have, they're going to hold a hearing so that they'll take testimony. So when it comes back, our plan is to just have it on the consent calendar and let all the testimony and all the work be done at SPRAB. You know, if there's controversy, council can always call it up.
Keep your mind open on that.
No, council can always call it up for a hearing, but our plan is to have the hearing there rather than here.
Keep your mind open on that for a while. Let's see how that kind of progresses.
Okay.
Okay? I just ask you to, if you
Oh,
could.
well, you always retain the
Well, I
right to
could
call
just
anything
ask.
up.
I'm not asking for more work. I'm just asking to make sure that the public has a full say on this before we make any final decisions. Yes, Councilor Cook.
I just have a final question about the bike rental, kayak rental kiosks that are listed in the park. Is the city pursuing partnerships with those, or is that something that we're looking at doing in-house? Is that something the Parks Board is looking at addressing?
Well, we haven't really gotten to that point yet. This is just the initial plan. I think the idea would be that there might be a private vendor that might then operate that so that the city doesn't have to take on that burden. But who knows, partnerships could definitely play into it.
Just one final observation. I noticed the Willamette Queen is missing from all pictures I've seen so far. Is there any message there? What are you?
No, it was in there. There she is.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
It's a big part.
You're really
It
making that a
looks
bigger
really
dock
small in
then.
the graphic, I know,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
it's to scale.
Okay, so that's what that is the Willamette Queen?
Yes.
Was there any comment on your floating dock? Did people like that idea? I think that's a kind of a neat thing.
Well, people really liked it.
Great.
I don't know if the Marine Board was so thrilled with the idea, but
Yeah.
that's something that we need to work through when we get to that point of, I mean, that's one of the big ticket items in the budget for
Is
the
it?
whole plan.
Did the Marine Board raise objections?
They'd raised concerns about it, yes. I think because of the no wake zone, and also just, they didn't like, originally we had a second dock, and because of their comments, we moved it to the existing dock and expanded the existing dock so that we did not add another no wake zone, because they were concerned about pushing all the river traffic into the middle of the river and
Where wakes make sense instead of in the...
instead of in the dock, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Will we hear from them at some point?
They're on our email list, so they've received the
Okay.
plan, and I think if it gets to the point where we're actually pursuing building it, then we would definitely engage them and talk
Great.
about permits and how to make it work.
Councilor Cook?
This may be covered by the Marine Board's concerns as well, but looking at water access and safety, I know we have our life jacket stations that we've installed at points of water access. Would this be something that we would partner with the sheriff, with county, with fire that have ability to do water rescue, or is this something that we would staff as far as having points outside along the waterway to make sure that people are being safe or being able to
I know
have
we've
eyes
received
out there?
comments about making sure that there would be a water rescue, that they could dock at either the boardwalk or at the existing dock, so that there would be that aspect that they could use the dock for emergency rescues.
Because my next question would be if the services that we already house that provide those services, if they're staffed to be able to handle the anticipated visitor load for those services, making sure that if more people are coming to use those services, that we're putting ourselves in a place of success so that we can
Yes,
be on the front end of anything that might develop.
yes. I mean, Parks Operations, of course, has been involved in this, and they see all these new amenities, and they see that they're going to need some help for
I mean,
maintaining these, so,
Totally, yes, going for the amenities, but not forgetting about that
right.
feature. Great.
Excellent, then. If there's no further questions, we will move on to the rest of the evening. Thank you very much, Patricia.
you.
Peter, appreciate it. This work session's adjourned.
Authority of the City of Salem to order. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Kaiser? Present. Commissioner Anderson?
Likewise.
Commissioner Nanki? Here. Chair McCoy?
Here.
Commissioner Ossett? Here. Commissioner Hoy?
Here.
Commissioner Cook?
Here.
Vice Chair Lewis?
Here?
Okay, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we have no approvals or additions or deletions to the agenda. Public comment. We see have nobody signed up to speak to the Housing Authority. Does anybody here wish to do so? Nope. Vice Chair Lewis, have a motion for me.
Thank you, Chair McCoy. I move acceptance of the consent calendar.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Andy, do you have anything you want to talk about on the consent calendar?
Thank you, sir. Really quick. In the purchase and sale of the Aquina, you'll notice that we were going to be costing $391,600, but DAS was nice enough to us, for our clients, to make sure that they have parking into perpetuity. So we're saving about $100,000 and $1,600 for the Aquina.
That's always a good thing.
Great thing.
Yeah, good. Commissioner Anderson,
Thank you, Mr. Chair or Mr. President, whatever your title is.
keep it coming.
Andy, this is great, and I just was curious about the 130,000 reduction. Does that mean you have to apply for less grants, or does that mean you've got $130,000 to spend some other way?
We're within the realm from Oregon Housing, so I don't think they're taking any back.
Okay, good. Thanks.
We won't let them.
Any other questions for Andy? Okay, you have somebody else you want to speak on the budget?
Kalina, please. This is Kalina, and she's our finance person. She's gonna, oh, yeah, there you go. Okay, very good. Annual budget.
Sorry, I think the screen is meant for someone taller to be able to see it. And I don't see it up there. There we go. I should have wore heels. Okay. So this is the presentation of the Salem Housing Authority 2018-2019 budget. And our budgets are always zero-based budgets. This budget year is $28,064,930, and that is going to serve approximately 3,745 households, and that's with our federal dollars. I do have some other slides later that shows some of the grant money that we have and some of the other households that we're able to serve. Our estimates are based on current federal funding, our forecast, and any past congressional appropriations. Properties that are not included in this budget are our tax credit properties and our managed projects. And if you have the actual printed out budget, that's going to be that last page of the packet. It's going to show you everything that's not included in this budget, as they will have their own budgets individually. And so here's our revenue sources for this next fiscal year. As you'll see, the Housing Authority is almost 80% federally funded. That federal funding is for all of our public housing, our voucher programs, and our moderate rehab program. And that comes to about $22 million in funding. 7% comes from our actual owned properties, and then what we receive in management fees from the federal government for running those programs. The other percentage, the 13% there, we've had a large increase this year in our grant programs. A big portion of that is from the City of Salem for the Homeless Rental Assistance Program. We also receive money for VITA, and then we have a Veterans Rental Assistance Program that we receive from OHA, which also, very similar to the Homeless Rental Assistance, helps to house veterans. And we have an agreement with Mid-Willamette Community Action Agency to do that housing. This is just a breakout of our expenses. As you can see, the vast majority of all of the money that we receive in throughout the year, 75%, goes right back out into housing assistance programs. That is an accumulated total of everything that we're receiving in from federal, as well as anything that's received in through our grant programs. Personnel expense, while rising a bit this year, is still pretty reasonable at 14%. And then all of our other operational expenses are only coming in right at under 11%. And that is before, as it shows at the bottom, any of our debt service and our capital expenditures. Those are calculated separate from that. And so this is just a breakout of what we're able to do with this budget and our assistance levels. Sorry, that looks a little dim from here. But from last year, just calculating our federal funding, a couple of changes that I've made in this year's budget is to include the grants. In our grant programs this year, we're able to house up to 142 people with the funding that we've received. And so I've included that there. There's also been a little bit of change in our moderate rehab. We used to have 3 contracts. 2 of those have closed out and decided not to exist in the moderate rehab program. Most of those clients received vouchers, so they didn't lose their funding. 9 out of 10 of them moved over into the voucher program. So you'll see an increase in our vouchers, where our moderate rehab went down 10, and then the increase in our grants. All other housing assistance has remained pretty steady. We haven't lost any number. We do get less money, though, to house these number of people. So each year with federal funding, it goes down just a tiny bit, but we're still expected to house the same number of people. From this last year's budget, new projects or anything that changed in that was we received additional grant money and donations, which helped to assist and provide operational funds for the HRAP program. We also had new staffing that went with that program that was not included in last year's budget. Moving forward in this year and beyond, things that won't actually be in the budget because we don't have that established yet when it will actually happen, is our RAD conversion of public housing, both phase 1 and phase 2. We anticipate that phase 1 will happen right at the tail end of this fiscal year. So we've done the budget as if everything stays the same, that we haven't had any changes at that time, and then that'll really impact the year after that's budget. If everything is great and we move forward with that a little bit sooner, then we'll have a change in this year's budget from what we projected. Then the acquisition of affordable housing units for both Fisher and Yaquina, those are not included in this budget as we have not completely finished all of the signing of everything on that. So that would be a change to this current budget. We do have budget projections for each of those projects, balancing those out just like we do with everything else to a zero-based budget. Also, continued changes in federal funding. Each year we run based on what we think our federal funding is going to be. In this last year, we finished the calendar year, and about 4 months later, they came back and told us exactly how much money we had for vouchers and admin fees. So with federal funding, you kind of run as good as you think you can. They give you projections, and then you true up later. So we do try and keep quite a bit in our reserves, especially for our admin, for our staffing. So we're always running on that admin reserve. If ever within this, we've estimated 75% funding for HCV admin fees. If it comes in at 73%, we have that admin reserve to cover that. And so more detailed information, all of the budget is in your packages there. Each consolidated budget, then the budgets for our operations, different programs. One of the changes that you will notice, and it came up in our advisory committee, is under the grants and other programs, which you'd find on page 34. You will see there that we have the HRAP program, and then it's got a little plus sign there. That is to include any additional grants that we've received, also the matching funds that we've received from Abel's money, and then others like him who've donated. So that's all included in there. There are details of each funding and kind of what the totals are throughout the packet. So on our next steps here, clicked something there. There we go. We just have to adopt our 2018-19 operating budget and then authorize the execution of our HUD Form 52574, which I believe was included in that packet. If not, Andy's got another copy.
Okay, any questions for Quinn? Commissioner Hoy.
Thank you. I was curious about the housing coordinator position that we funded in part, I think about 1.5 years ago. Is that in this budget, or is that a general fund, City of Salem general fund budget question?
So if you look at page 5 of your packet, so at the bottom it kind of gives you the full-time equivalents of our staffing positions. And you'll see I added a line for grants. That wasn't in the last year's packet. So with the housing coordinator position, there is a one funded from the HRAP position. It's at about 75% through that grant. We've also gone out and received, I believe, 4 additional grants to fund our other staff members. And so that's what the 5 was there. We have added in this very last year 3 additional staff members to handle that caseload.
I'm speaking about the position, I think it's housed at the COG. Is it?
Oh, that's
Is that a different, I'm sorry, is that a different program, Andy? Am I getting those mixed up?
Well, it's, I know what you're talking about, but the Housing Authority hasn't had any standing in that particular place. And I don't really know what that position is doing. I can't tell you.
Okay, that's what I was trying to determine
sorry.
is what we're getting for our money, but if that's not out of this
Casey?
budget, it might be for a different time.
I'm sorry.
so.
We got Casey, I think.
That was a City of Salem
That's City of Salem.
partially funded position.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Colleen. This is, also congratulations, this is very detailed and clear as you go through it. It's easily understandable even for somebody like me, so great job on a very complicated budget, I think. So thank you. Okay, so we've got the motions that we're talking about here are contained in the consent calendar, which we moved and seconded. There's no further questions. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. And that is it. We've got an information report there, and that's it. So I'm going to call this meeting, the Housing Authority of the City of Salem, adjourned.
I'm going to call this meeting of the City of Salem Urban Renewal Agency for September 24th to order. Please call the roll.
Board Member Kaiser. Present. Board Member Anderson. Here. Board Member Nanki. Here. Board Member McCoy. Here. Board Member Ossick.
Here.
Board Member Hoy.
Here.
Board Member Cook. Here. Board Member Lewis.
Here.
And Chair Bennett.
Here. I don't see any additions or deletions. Do we have any public comment? I have no one signed up to address the Urban Renewal Agency. Is there anyone who wanted to address the Urban Renewal Agency? All righty. Consent calendar, Councilor McCoy.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second by Kaiser.
Okay, the consent calendar has the September 10th Urban Renewal Agency minutes in it, and under action items, it's got an amendment to, we've got an action item to authorize the executive director to execute the attached amendment to the real estate purchase option agreement with John Saffron, Argo Investment Corporation, Nancy Hasman, Diane Marshall, and Richard Gassner. And this basically is moving the closing date from September 26th to October 31st on the portion there that we're talking about.
Did you want to speak on that?
Yes, Kristen Rutherford, Urban Development Director. This is not extending the closing date. Losing my mic. Extending the closing date for the acquisition. It's extending the amount of time we have to complete the purchase and sell agreement. The actual closing date will occur in 2019.
And what's going on in that interim period?
Within this 1 month period where we're asking for the extension, that is because we had a requirement to enter into a purchase and sell agreement within a certain amount of time from exercising our option on the property.
Okay.
We were still going through our due diligence and environmental analysis of the site. So we're just wrapping that up, but that wasn't within the window. So we needed an extra month time to wrap that up. And then we will be coming back October 22nd with the purchase and sell agreement.
Any problems showing up?
It's going to be very similar to the conditions at the UGM site.
Okay. Further questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. And that's it, isn't it? We're going to adjourn the Urban Renewal Agency. Call this meeting of the Salem City Council for September 24th to order. If you call the roll.
Counselor Kaiser. Present. Counselor Anderson.
Likewise.
Counselor Nanki. Here. Counselor McCoy.
Here.
Counselor Ossick.
Here.
Counselor Hoy.
Here.
Counselor Cook. Here. Counselor Lewis.
Here.
And Mayor Bennett.
Here. Okay. Give an agenda. I don't know where mine went. This pile of stuff. Okay. Any additions or deletions, Counselor?
No.
No?
No. Just some written testimony. but-
Just the written testimony? Okay, very good. This is the opportunity for the council or city manager to make comment. Any comments? Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. Wanted to mention on Friday, actually, the mayor and I went out to the police facility site to visit with Kimberly Fitzgerald, who's one of our city planners. She's also a registered professional archaeologist and has been overseeing some work on the site for archaeology work. And we are using also a contractor out there. And we went out there to see the sites that they've, or the places they've been digging in, and down each level, which is 10 centimeters, and how far down they're going and finding historic artifacts, both from Euro-American settlement and also pre-contact artifacts. So it's pretty fascinating to see that. And I believe there were dozens of volunteers from the Oregon Archaeological Society, which was great as well. So it was really fun to see that. It's not something that the public always gets to see. So it was a fun time. And then the second thing is on Saturday there was Salem Open Streets, And also, Mayor Bennett and I also participated in that, and there was a bike ride with the mayor, and we got to judge the puppet parade and give out awards for that, so it was fun. And Councilor Cook was there as well, manning one of the roundabouts and all of that, so it was a good event, so happy to see it happen again this year.
Yeah, I want to second your well, on both events, they were both great. Really enjoyed them. The archaeology, if you haven't had a chance to go out to that site and see what they're doing, it's really worth taking an opportunity to go there. And if you want to volunteer, they'll put you to work. How deep is 10 centimeters to dig, Counselor? It's about that big.
3 inches.
Do you have to dig it in a perfect square? This is what I've heard.
I'm not an archaeologist, so I couldn't tell you, but
They look square.
you could fit like, I don't know, a couple people
Yeah.
or so down there, and they didn't want to get too far down or they start running into, I think it's OSHA,
Yeah.
with supporting the walls and, so it doesn't collapse on somebody, but they'll keep digging until they stop hitting things.
And they're finding hundreds of artifacts. It'll be very interesting, I think, for everyone to see the kinds of things they're finding. Counselor Anderson?
Thank you. I'm sorry to miss another opportunity to go bike riding with you, Mayor, but that leads to my comment. I was gone last week from Thursday through early this morning at a high school reunion of mine in inner suburb of Chicago. And
That 10th reunion? or-
well, I wish.
Yeah.
Multiply that by a few and you're there. But my wife and I had the opportunity to walk around the town that I grew up in that is only 15,000, but it is part of the Chicago greater metropolitan area. And we ate outside several times at lovely, and I'm looking, well, Kristen's not here, but I'll be talking to her. It was just a lovely time eating outside on a United States highway that is a main north-south connector, much more busy than Commercial or Liberty, and it was really enjoyable. And the restaurants had kind of fenced-off areas where you could eat, and it was parking, 4 lanes of traffic, parking, and even though that was going on and we were outside, it was terrific. So I'm hoping that something like that might come out of the downtown streetscape study, and I'm sure it will, something in that direction.
Great, thank you. We're glad you made it home okay. Time to get home? 3?
Quarter of 3.
Yeah, okay. Yes, Counselor.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. I just wanted to echo my other counselors' comments that Open Street Salem was a fantastic event on Saturday. It was great to see the mayor there. We had a lot of feedback from neighbors about traffic calming elements and how excited they were to be engaging with the council-approved route, and the concerns that they had, just how meaningful it was to be able to give that feedback to the city and be able to move forward on so many things. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to the Salem Reads group that was there. So I can see Councilor Hoy has the book on his desk. Good Morning Midnight. It's supposed to be a page turner, and one community, one book. We're doing it again, and just super excited about it.
Great, thank you very much. Counselor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to remind everybody that you're all invited out to Ward 6 this Friday, 5 p.m. at the Swiggle Boys and Girls Club for the CAPES. That's the Community and Partners of East Salem Day of Play. There's usually between 500 and 800 folks there at the Boys and Girls Club, and I think the weather looks like it's going to be a great event. So 5 o'clock, it's right there just on Market Street, at Market and 45th. So come on out, it's a great event.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Manager? Okay. No proclamations. Yay. No presentations, so we have public comment. Jan and Gary, Kiditz, come on up. We'll. Don't want to make you wait all evening.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, hi, everybody. First of all, we have to say thank you.
Now say your name.
Oh, Jan Kidotz, I'm sorry. 3797 June Avenue Northeast. You'd think I'd know this by now, huh? But anyway, first, a big thank you. The chief of police and the deputy police came to our house and said there is a TLC at 2275. Coral, great. It was really, which is so good. We did have to, after that, call 911 because two guys, homeless guys, tried to kick down the front door, but now the police can come onto the property.
Excellent.
It's wonderful. And both of us want to thank all the officers, and believe me, I know a lot of numbers, a lot. And every one of them have been wonderful. Great. More than wonderful, and so appreciative. But we also discussed 2195 Vaughn also. And it's slow, but they said they're working on it. The only thing is, there's still, a lot of people call it, drugs are us and prostitutes are us. It's not getting any better. As a matter of fact, I'll let my husband Gary, when he gets up and talk, because he had the first initiation of this female who was so high on drugs that come up our deck and onto our patio door, knocked on it, pounded on it. He initiated, I wasn't right there at the time, so he will tell you that. But anyway, it's just that another guy here, as a matter of fact, it was last Tuesday, and they're hiring a kite and come running through our back side, jump through cactuses. Yeah, we got those big yucca cactuses. And through our driveway, over more cactuses, through our side front yard, we've got a retaining wall about like this, jumped over that, through our driveway, through our front, right down to Ray's. We know who's new and who isn't, and it's not getting any better. And you know what? I'm not comfortable anymore at all. When they came knocking on that patio door, I'm sorry. And then, like I said, my husband will, because he initiated the talk with her and stuff, but it's got to stop. I don't know why it can't be declared derelict. I think it's a great idea, and so do all the neighbors. That everybody's afraid. And there's so many kids around there. Oh my gosh, the needles, no. But anyway, so thanks for your time, you guys. And again, thanks for the TLC and all the officers' help. They have been marvelous. Any questions?
Okay. Gary?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Gary Kaidas. I live at 3797 June Avenue, Salem, Oregon. When my wife was talking about, I'm in my dining room reading a book. We've got an alarm system, and when somebody comes on our property, it sets it off. My wife had turned it off. So anyway, I'm sitting in the dining room reading a book. All of a sudden, somebody's beating on my sliding glass door. I look, it's a spaced out chick, gone. I mean, she is completely gone. She says, I'm going to destroy all your property if you don't take care of that woman. I said, what do you, I said, I don't know you. What are you talking about? I'm going to destroy the property all around this house. I said, what are you talking about? And then my wife come out, says, we don't need you. We don't know you. You need to leave our property. So she leaves. I told Jan to call the police. Down the street at this 2195 Vaughn, that's where the police come and arrest her. So I have to sign a complaint. She's arrested. They come and get me, park right in front of my house, which is a block away, come to me. I get in the car, go down there and say, yeah, that's her, 80%, 100%. I said 100%. They take her to jail. Anyway, I want to thank the chief of police, the deputy chief. They come to our house, what my wife was saying. But the one thing I said to them is, when is enough enough? With that house down there, when is enough enough for you people? I wish it was next door to all of you, and you could see what it's like. Mr. Hoy, I gave you some pictures about 2047 and 2077 Coral. Nothing's been done. It's 2 months ago now. Not a thing's been done. You said you turned them over to code enforcement. Nothing. It's like a wrecking yard, that one, 2077. There's semis in the backyard, motor homes, cars out on the street with motors out of them. That's not the way it's supposed to be in Salem. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Counselor McCoy.
Belabor the issue, but the last time these folks were here, we got a little agitated. I know I did, and I said, what the heck do you need to fix this problem? And we got assurances from the staff that they were going to develop a proposal and bring it back. Where are we at on that, if anywhere?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have code enforcement here tonight. I don't think we knew this. I think we ought to probably knew this was coming up, ask that we get a report on where we stand. There are some changes going on, as I understand it, to derelict housing, and perhaps we could hear a report from the police on, if we can get code enforcement and the police here to maybe give us an information report on this situation. This just is the never-ending saga of this neighborhood and this family. And he's right. If it was next door to any of us, we would be in absolutely the same state, only we got a stage. And fortunately, they're using this stage, and I appreciate you coming down every time, but we have just got to get an answer here. You can turn in all the pictures you want, you can make all the phone calls you want, but until the ordinances are aligned in such a way that we can move quickly on this kind of derelict housing, or we have some sort of system that allows us to go to owners and get this stuff resolved, I don't know. But I'd like to hear what Brady is up to, and perhaps hear from Jerry or Skip or one of them on what's going on.
Well, I guess, yeah, I'd like an update, just what actions have been taken, what are you looking at? When can we expect something before us?
Yeah.
And is there anything else you need from us to get this moving forward? I mean,
yeah, I think we've been clear.
2 years?
Yeah, I think we've been clear. We'll do whatever they need to help
Exactly.
get this done. So, Councilor Cook.
I know that at the last neighborhood meeting, we had the officer who came to report talked about the problem-oriented or project-oriented policing, the POPs team. And so when this report is brought in, I know we would like to have an update to make sure if this is something that can help streamline a process for them. This is definitely a problem, and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Well, we're into our second year of hearing from the Kiteses, and I love seeing them, but it's never a good news situation, so. Okay? You'll have it? Good, thank you. Okay, consent calendar.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second by Kaiser.
On the consent calendar, we have the minutes of the September 10th council meeting, and under action items, we have 2 items. One is the formation of the staff recommendation. If it passed, this will appoint members listed in the facts and findings section to form the Sustainable Services Revenue Task Force. Excuse me. And the second item authorizes the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the Housing Authority of the City of Salem to provide administrative support, finance and payroll, fleet services, human resources, information technology, legal purchasing, real estate, reprographics, and urban development support for fiscal year 2018-19.
What are those reprographic things?
I know, that's
Okay, I just thought I'd check, see if you knew what that
is that copying? Thank you.
On the copying stuff, okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. Okay, we'll move on to public hearings. I'll open, this is a continuation of an appeal, correct? 18435, we'll open that up. Right?
The Salem City Council will now hold a public hearing for the purpose of hearing an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision on comprehensive plan change, zone change, urban growth preliminary declaration case number CPC ZC UGA 18-04 for property located at 4195 Aumsville Highway Southeast. The criteria applicable to this appeal are Salem Revised Code 64.025E2, 265.005E1, and 200.025D and E. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes to apply to the decision. A failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue shall preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The hearing will be conducted with staff presentation first, followed by testimony from the following. The applicant is limited to 10 minutes. The appellant is limited to 10 minutes. Neighborhood associations are limited to 5 minutes, and other interested parties are limited to 3 minutes. And the applicant's rebuttal is limited to 5 minutes. A yellow light will appear at the podium when 1 minute remains, and a red light will appear when your time has expired. Please conclude your testimony when the red light appears.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Pamela Cole, Case Manager for Comprehensive Plan Change, Zone Change, and Urban Growth Preliminary Declaration Case number CPC ZC UGA 1804, continued this evening. I'd like to enter the presentation, staff reports, and attachments into the official record. The applicant is requesting a comprehensive plan change from community services government to industrial commercial, a zone change from public and private health service to industrial commercial, and an urban growth preliminary declaration. The extension to the 120-day deadline is through October 12th, 2018, so unless we receive further extensions, we need to have a decision tonight, and we'll bring back the order at the next council meeting. Just wanted to note for the record, all we're looking at tonight would be these items. We are not looking at any specific land use actions or development plans. So for future development, we might have conditional use applications, site plans, subdivisions, et cetera, that would be required for specific proposals.
Okay.
The property is 15 acres located inside the urban growth boundary and city limits with Joseph Street southeast, a local street on the north, and Aumsville Highway southeast, and minor arterial on the south. The northwestern area is near the intersection with Deer Park Drive southeast, which is a collector. Kubler is about a mile northwest of the subject property, and that's a parkway. The property is located near Corbin University, the Department of Corrections, Marion County Public Safety Complex, and the Mill Creek Corporate Center. It was formerly a part of the Department of Corrections property, but was partitioned and was later purchased by Corbin University, and the applicant purchased the property from Corbin. The subject property is designated Community Services Government. Corbin is Community Services Education. Mill Creek Corporate Center is Employment Center. The nearest other industrial commercial parcels are near Kubler at Turner Road Southeast. On a site, when you total up all those parcels, it's approximately the same area as this one parcel. The property is zoned public and private health services, along with the Department of Corrections and part of the Corbin property. Mill Creek is Employment Center, and several properties near Kubler at Turner are also industrial commercial. Nearby properties that are outside the UGB in Marion County are zoned special agriculture and acreage residential. The red line here indicates the city limits, which happen to be on the northern side of Joseph Street Southeast, and the heavy black line indicates the urban growth boundary, which is along the southern side of Joseph Street Southeast. That creates a unique set of situations, and we attempted to address that in the conditions of approval. Joseph Street here is very narrow, and it's not improved to urban standards. The homes on the large parcels and agricultural uses are located outside the urban growth boundary to the north and the east. The property has large fir trees and Oregon white oak trees, as well as other trees, and power lines bisect the property from north to south. This map shows the topography and landslide hazards. The property rises about 150 feet from the northwest to the east, about 9 to 10% overall. And the green areas indicate mapped landslide hazards, so development would be required to submit geological assessments or geotechnical reports. The Planning Commission approved the request with conditions, finding that the proposed industrial commercial designation and zone are equally or better suited for the property than the current designations. The UGA requirements demonstrate how the property is capable of being served. The proposed designations are logical because the property is inside the UGB and city limits and has access to arterial and collector streets. It is also near institutional industrial properties and near transit service, and the physical characteristics of the property are suitable for uses that are allowed in the proposed zone. One of the conditions is for a trip cap, and under the transportation planning rule, we're required to either make a finding of no significant effect to approve the change in comprehensive plan designation and zoning. So either the city places a trip cap that limits traffic to the volumes allowed under current designations, or the applicant provides additional analysis to show that traffic would not have a significant impact. Traffic engineering reviewed the applicant's transportation planning rule analysis, where the reasonable worst case of uses under the current designations would be 5,948 average daily trips. Reasonable worst case under the proposed zone would be slightly higher, so the trip cap is on the lower total of 5,948 vehicle trips per day. The requirements under the Urban Growth Preliminary Declaration describe the conditions for street improvements, sewer, water, stormwater, and if the property is developed for residential use, there are also conditions for parks. For testimony, recently we received a letter from Southeast Mill Creek Association in support, and as the record shows, and you've seen in your staff reports, we did receive quite a bit of written testimony and also oral testimony at the Planning Commission hearings in opposition to the project. Most of the concerns, significant concerns especially, were traffic and conflicts with the existing uses that are outside the city limits. Among the public agencies that commented, Marion County requested coordination on traffic studies and mitigation measures for future development. In the letter of appeal, the appellant states that the Planning Commission was in error because they applied a lower standard of review than would be required for a significant change in uses. The Planning Commission found that the applicant met the burden of proof, and we would like to note that we're not comparing this current situation there. We're actually comparing what would be allowed in the PH zone versus what would be allowed in the IC zone. And as an example, single-family residential is one of the uses that the neighbors said would be suitable for the property, but it's actually prohibited in PH. It would be a conditional use in IC. Another of the effects that the appellant noted was that the Planning Commission erred by approving an application that didn't meet all the criteria, and part of the reasoning was that the applicant didn't provide a specific use, so it was difficult to see whether it met the criteria. But at this stage of the process, a specific use and development plan is not required, so the Planning Commission evaluated the range of uses that would be allowed in the industrial commercial zone. The appellant stated that the Planning Commission incorrectly found that the IC is equally or better suited because of the physical characteristics of the property, and we have to note that Corbin is developed on slopes that are quite significant, and similar to those of this property, Corbin has buildings including housing, offices, large buildings, auditoriums, and parking that would be similar building types to those that would be allowed in the industrial commercial zone. The appellant also stated that the Planning Commission erred because the applicant didn't prove that the amendment would be of general benefit, and the Planning Commission found that looking at the wider range of uses that would be allowed, that those could benefit the public. Council's alternatives this evening would be to affirm the decision of the Planning Commission, deny the application, or modify the conditions of approval. For example, modify the location of access points, limit uses, or restrict heights. We did receive this morning from the appellant a list of proposed alternative conditions, and we did review those among staff today. Significantly, these would include shifting access from Aumsville Highway to Joseph Street while reducing or eliminating street widening and/or improvements on both of those streets. Staff does not recommend adopting these modifications. Most of Joseph Street abutting the property is very narrow and unsuitable for two-way traffic at this time. And because most of it is outside the urban growth boundary, the city can't require the street to be improved to urban standards, including curbs and sidewalks. Because the neighbors had previously opposed increased traffic on Joseph Street, the Planning Commission required access from Aumsville Highway. And there we can require a three-quarter street improvement, including bike lanes, sidewalks, and left turn lanes. If the applicant does not want to provide access from Joseph Street, they have the option of applying for a variance when they submit for development. And also, one of the issues was trying to modify the street widening and other requirements in order to preserve more of the trees on Joseph Street. There are also other avenues by which the applicant can do that. Particularly, they could request a UGA modification, and later they could propose alternative street alignments or other standards when they submit development proposals to preserve more of those trees. Their modifications were use restrictions for part of the property in the area east of the power lines, and those would be single-family, duplex, or multifamily. Those would all be allowed as conditional uses, and we believe that at the time that there is a development proposal, we would certainly be able to place height restrictions or other conditions to ensure that those potential uses are compatible with the surrounding development. So that concludes my presentation. Of course, I'm available to answer questions.
Great, thank you very much. We'll go ahead with public testimony. The first, who do we have signed up for the applicant? Okay. Mark Hoyt, that's you. 10 minutes.
Thomas, thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to try and exit out of this if I can, if you can give me not run my time until I can get our PowerPoint up. That would be nice. Let's see that. No. I dropped it. Oh, there we go. There we go. Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you. Mark Hoyt, Sherman, Johnny, and Hoyt, 693 Chemeketa Street, Northeast, Salem. Here on behalf of the applicant, Cascade Legacy Properties. The staff's done an excellent job kind of framing the application, so I want to kind of get to the point here. This application deals with addressing a zoning application or a zone designation that was applied 42 years ago. So the application is actually, at this point in time, well, shall we say outdated slightly. If you look at the city of Salem, this is what it looked like when the property was zoned roughly. You can see where the property is located. You can see it's right inside the UGB. You can see the city of Turner here, and you can see the complete or virtual complete absence of development surrounding the property. Over the course of time, the city has grown a bit, moved out towards the property. As that has happened, circumstances have changed. You know, and you saw in the staff's presentation, Mill Creek is in this area, Corbin University is in this area. At Mill Creek, Home Depot has developed, Amazon has developed, Henningsen Cold Storage has developed, Pack Trust just recently leased their property to a garden supply store. Councilor Hoy is aware of the development proposed for the mushroom plant area up there, which would be 800 additional homes out in this area. The city of Turner has approved a 200-home, 130-apartment development not far from this property. The area has changed. That's why we bring this application to you. Corbin now needs housing. Salem needs housing. We have workforce that requires housing here in Salem. This is an opportunity to create a zone that has some flexibility for use in an area that has changed. It used to be part of the Department of Corrections holdings. It is now a property that is being developed or is in the process of being surrounded by commercial development. One of the things to be considered is this is an area that is about as far from the controversial bridge as you can get in the city of Salem. If you push development to that area, you take congestion away from it. You provide services and the opportunity for residences and possible other services in this place. It also provides housing for people who need it. Right now, we have an effective zero occupancy rate or zero vacancy rate for apartments in Salem. We need more housing, which would be an option that could be considered here. So that's the reason this application comes forward. We believe that that demonstrates that all the criteria are met and that you can address and look at all of the things that the plan requires, which is that it's compatible with surrounding uses. You have that in the developments, in the commercial developments that need housing. You have that in the people that will be moving into Turner that need services. You have that at Corbin for the students there that need services and additional housing. There are all kinds of surrounding uses that make this consistent and an appropriate designation. One of the things that's been significant through this process, and you've heard the staff mention in a little bit, is that the neighbors in the area do not want this property developed in any way other than acreage or shall we say, rural residential acreage. We noticed in the Southeast Mill Creek Association, the neighborhood association in which this property is located approves of this application. The people inside the city that will be affected by this application approved of it. The objection is coming from those people who live in the county. Now, if you look at this and they say, hey, you have to look at what's going to be impacted. They want to limit the impacts to those people that are immediately adjacent to the property. So what we did is say, okay, how far away do those people live? Well, this is the farthest one, so 1.25 miles. If you apply that circle, inside that circle is Amazon, Henningsen, Home Depot, Corbin University. Those are all closer to the property than the farthest neighbor that objects. If we step it out just a little more to the business owned by the primary objector, Mr. Krautman, his Heritage Seedlings, we add in the OSP headquarters, and you can see how large the circle becomes. We're now encompassing housing to the north along Kubler, the intersection of Sandy Am Highway and Cordon Road. You have significant scope of influence in this application. So if you consider that area, this proposal is entirely consistent with the entire set. Now, I'm not sure. So what you have here, if you look, the PH zone's on the left, the IC zone is on the right. The PH zone is a fairly restricted public zone. It allows certain public uses that you would consider like hospitals, nursing facilities, residential care, those kinds of things. If you look at the IC zone, it simply expands those uses. This is not a wholesale change. This is a click on the dial. This is moving a little bit from left to right to say, hey, we're going to expand what can be done here to recognize that this area is changing and growing up around it. So if you look at the comparison of the two, you see you have a significant similarities, and the additional uses are not significant, and in fact include some of the uses the neighbors would like applied. Now, if you listen to the neighbors and say, hey, all we're going to have, what you can have here is rural residential housing, and you have to have acreage residential housing abutting that, this is the development pattern you will establish for your city. You will commit properties that abut your UGB to rural development inside your UGB. So when you want to expand your UGB, you're going to have to jump those residential properties outside your UGB, bring in more farmland. And so you'll go urban, rural, urban, rural, urban, rural. So while the objection is understandable because people have purchased acreage homes and they want to live on those, that objection is not realistic when you look at the concept of urban planning and what it's supposed to accomplish. And if we go back to those charts we showed you with what's included, you see that there's a significant amount of impact on this property within the same area. So we have the dirt. We've made the application. It was approved by the Planning Commission. They reviewed the criteria that applied and said that this met that criteria and approved it. That was appealed here. We come here tonight with really two requests for you, and it is this. One, either affirm the Planning Commission approval of this application, recognizing that this area and the conditions and the circumstances that surround this particular piece of property have changed, and that the additional flexibility provided by the IC zone is an appropriate adoption of property here. Or two, we have no objection to the Joseph Street neighbors' proposed conditions, with the exception of condition number 8. Their condition number 8 has 3 issues that we do not believe should be included or should be modified. One is a height restriction. We would ask that that be deleted from their conditions. 2 is the number of units that they propose. Their proposal for the number, well, before I go to that, number 2 is the fact that they're asking, we want to make sure that condition is not read to say that the eastern portion of the property can only be developed with residential, single-family or multifamily properties. If a density restriction is applied, it should apply to development for single-family or multifamily residential. Other uses approved in the zone should not be subject to that density regulation. Those 2 modifications. The third is the level of density that they want applied to this property. They are asking for 8 single-family residences that would essentially be placed, and these ideas came from discussions that we had with the neighbors in trying to solve this, and I want to compliment the neighbors. They have been, for land use opponents, they have been very gracious, they have been very participatory. This has been a unique process to be involved in, and I have very much appreciated it. But one of the concepts that was discussed was to place single-family residences here along Joseph Street that would provide a buffer to the existing neighbors, and then do infill multifamily development down here. And to reduce the zoning, basically keep the density allowed in the zone to the west, reduce the zone density in the zone to the east. As part of those discussions, we looked at several things. First, we looked at how many units could be approved or could be built under the existing zoning if it was done. And if, through a conditional use process, as staff noted, that would require additional input, there could be as many as 327 units on the entire property. We looked at that and said, okay, we have significant development costs associated with building this property out. There's a lot of water, there's a lot of sewer, there's a lot of road improvements, as you heard from staff. So we looked at that, the carrying costs of those improvements, given those units. And we said, okay, can we reduce that amount? And we said, well, if we can get the city to maybe modify how some things are done. One is to defer the improvements on Aumsville Highway, because that's not a road that's going to be developed anytime in the future. Modify some of the requirements, have my clients make a significant contribution in the amount of the $218,000 proposed by the neighbors to the Deer Park Street intersection here, so improvements could be made to this area. Create walking paths that will provide access here. We could reduce the density. And looking at what we thought we could realistically ask of the staff and the city to approve, we came up with a number that we didn't think would quite be enough. So my clients looked at it and said, okay, we'll absorb almost $250,000 in development costs. And if we do that, we can come up with another number. Well, by doing that, we were able to reduce the total number of units by almost 90, well, in excess of 90. But that 90 unit reduction represents a roughly $7 to $9 million concession by my client. At those numbers, it would be 234 units or total, with a total of 75 units, 9 single family and 66 multifamily to the east. The proposal by the Joseph Street neighbors is that that number be 38. What I would say is this: we've asked you for one of 2 things. Thing one, approve it as provided by the Planning Commission. We think that the conditions, we think the facts, we think the circumstances warrant that. Thing 2 would be modify condition number 8. If you look at condition number 8, the city we are asking to give, 30 seconds and I'll be done.
Well, okay.
The city we are asking to give on the roads, my client is giving roughly $7 to $9 million in concessions. The Joseph Street neighbors are giving nothing towards that. We'd ask that they only be asked to give about 10% additional density, which is the difference between 38 units up to the 75 units that we would request be the limit on the east side.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions for Mr. Hoyt? Yes, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyt. I did have a bunch of questions related to the conditions that were proposed by counsel for the appellants, but you've answered them, most of them. One was, what about number 4 and what about number 7? And you've conceded or willing to go along with those, I think would be a better way to state that. My question is about your objections to number 8. I understand you objected to the height restrictions, and then I also understand you were concerned about the level of density. And what was your second objection? I had it down as would not be applied to the rest of the development, or
well,
something
we want to be
different
sure that the condition was not read to say that it would restrict development of the eastern half of the property to residential development.
Okay.
So that the other uses approved in the zone would be allowable under the terms.
All right. And would that be something the staff would have to read into it, or would that be something the staff would have to play around with exhibit, with condition number 8 to come up with some kind of language that would
I think a
satisfy
very minor modification to
All
condition
right.
number 8 would address that.
Then my final question is the reduction in number of units that you were talking about. Where would you suggest that show up in any staff report if we say, you know, those are concessions that you're willing to make in terms of how you develop?
We would have no problem if you just look at condition number 8, where it says 8 single-family residences, make that 9.
Okay.
And where it says 30 multifamily, make that 66. Because if we do that, then those numbers are in there, and that condition would apply only in the circumstances of
That we've already
multi or
discussed.
single-family
Okay.
residential development.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Any further? Yes, Councilor White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you clarify something for me? I think during your discussion, you suggested that this is going to be all residential. And then I think I heard you just kind of walk that back. But in the material that we read, I don't think there's anything about residential. So I'm confused as to what the purpose is, and what are you trying to lead us into a painting a picture in our minds, or is that really, are there some facts on the table that suggest that?
It's a fair question and an appropriate one. Thank you. The designated uses for the property have not been determined. There has not been a definitive development plan put in place. It has been contemplated for development with apartments or some kind of single-family or multifamily residential, which would be subject to a conditional use process, which would allow for additional citizen and surrounding property owner input. We have not committed to that definitively. My client's not in a position to commit to that definitively. We have, as part of the discussions with the neighbors, said that if it is developed a single-family residential property, we would agree to these limitations and these structures that would buffer the impact on the Joseph Street neighbors and limit the impact of the city on them. But there has not been a commitment to any specific development form. In terms of painting a picture, I'm trying to relay to you what was discussed with them to give you an idea of why we're in agreement with those conditions. One of the conditions I think that gives staff some heartburn is that don't widen Joseph Street. And, we like that condition because we think that there are some trees that will be impacted. But we also recognize that if it wants to be widened, we would be in a position and willing to do that as well for the safety or addressing those concerns. But there's been no specific commitment to any kind of specific development plan. We're asking for the IC zone. We're willing to accept conditions as proposed, regardless of use in terms of the condition number 8 would be the only one we say doesn't apply to anything else. The access conditions, the road construction conditions, those would apply regardless of use.
Yes.
So why are you requesting the IC zone, and why not something else?
Well, it was basically the request for the IC zone came out of discussions with staff, given the current comprehensive plan designation, the surrounding property designations, and the need for, the opportunity for the possibility of construction. So it was what was identified as probably the most appropriate and prudent way to go forward, given the existing zoning and surrounding properties.
Okay. Any further questions? Yes, Councilor Cook.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the IC zone change and something that does tend to go with universities. I'm noticing the short-term commercial lodging and long-term commercial lodging. Is this something that, for multifamily, you've mentioned that, we've talked about height restrictions, how that usage would differ on the road impact if these were to be commercial for both short-term and long-term, if you could speak to that?
Certainly. I mean, until a specific use is identified, we wouldn't be in a position to tell you exactly what those traffic impacts would be. What we do know is that there's a proposed condition that we are fine accepting, that the number of trips generated by this site would be no different under the new zoning than it would have been under the old zoning. So no matter what the configuration would be, the traffic impacts would not change from those of the existing zoning. Does that address your question?
I hope so.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I just want to be sure, Mr. Hoyt, that these proposed conditions that were sent in by Mr. Shipman on behalf of his client around noon today, the only objection you have to those proposed conditions relates to condition number 8, which we've already discussed.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The appellant representative. Is that you, Mark? Is there another lawyer in the room that we haven't called up? Yeah, there we go.
Mr. Mayor, there's a number of lawyers in this room. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. For the record, Mark Shipman, land use attorney with Sawfield Griggs, 250 Church Street Southeast, Suite 200, Salem, Oregon, 97301. Here this evening on behalf of the appellant, Mark Krautman of Heritage Seedlings, and the Joseph Street neighbors, which comprise about 65 neighbors that live along Joseph Street and the Aumsville Highway out in this area. All of these folks live outside the city. If you look at the map there, you'll note that specifically Mr. Krautman's property, part of the properties that he and his wife Jolly own in Marion County, comprise over 102 acres to the northeast of where this proposed project is and property is. So that kind of gives you a bit of context from the aerial photograph. The question before you this evening is, should you affirm the recommendation of the Planning Commission? And I would urge that you don't affirm it as currently conditioned. And that's why I sent in those proposed conditions of approval. Those proposed conditions of approval have been items that we've been working on with the applicant, a developer in this, for quite a while. And I thought we were going to get there. We were super close, but we didn't. Mr. Hoyt has conceded that they agree with everything but 8. And 8's critical. 8's important because 8 deals with density. And density is driven by the fact of whether or not this change is logical with the surrounding neighborhood. That's the key thing. And I think that's been one of the neighbors' points from day one, is that you're essentially changing the zoning from PH to the IC. So why are they going from PH to IC? Well, they can't put apartments in PH. That's the bottom line. They want to put in apartments. They're going to put in apartments for Corbin. They're going to go in kind of near the finger or the toe, kind of down where Corbin is, and they would logically extend to the east as they go. The infrastructure out there, putting that in, would be exceedingly expensive, and that's why they're going to start at the northwest tip, and they're going to move southeasterly. I was going to bring up a conceptual drawing, but I think I'm just going to stick with this aerial photograph, because I think this aerial photograph is really illustrative of what's going on out there in this specific area. And I'd like to kind of address the proposed conditions real quickly, because I know that some of the other neighbors would like to testify with respect to the nature of the area, because the area is not similar to a typical urban area. We're right on the edge of the city. Joseph Street, I think, has been acknowledged, is narrow, and the neighbors like it that way. They want to keep that narrow nature of Joseph Street. In fact, they want to work with the developer in order, and city staff and Marion County Public Works staff, in order to put in traffic calming measures, because right now, people that are coming off the highway are using Joseph Street as a cut through down to Mill Creek Corporate Center. They don't take the Aumsville Highway, they cut through Joseph Street. And a couple of the neighbors here could testify that they've had significant accidents occur on their property based on the fact that you've got commercial vehicles or residential vehicles that are exceeding speed limits out in this area. And so something needs to happen one way or the other out there. So conditions, proposed conditions 4, 6, 7, and 9 relate to traffic transportation, and I think has been addressed. The proposed conditions that staff has identified are going to be substantially expensive. And if we propose, if the more cost we impose on the developer, the more density they're going to need to draw from this project. And they're going to want to make their development, and which is not compatible with the rural nature of this area. So if you look at the map directly to the north, just on the other side of the subject property line, that turquoise line, that's Joseph Street. Our clients are all those properties, all those property owners off of Sky Lane, Heritage Seedlings, the Krautman to the east, and then further and further to the south. More cost is going to essentially demand more density from the developer, which puts the neighbors and the developer at cross purposes, especially for what I'm going to call the kind of the power line division. Proposed conditions 8 and 10 relate to density and compatibility. And as I identified earlier, density is important with this application. This property had previously been owned by the Department of Corrections for over 100 years. It had been used by the Department of Corrections as a buffer area because their property is directly to the north of this property, and they used it as a buffer area. They in turn sold it to Corbin because Corbin wanted to use it for a natural area. Corbin didn't hang on to it very long as a natural area. They turned around and flipped it to the applicant. And that's water under the bridge. We can't deal with that right now. But what we can deal with is this change logical, particularly with those rural residential dwellings and properties to the north and to the east. We wanted to place limitations on that current and future development until the abutting property is brought into the urban growth boundary. And I don't think that's too difficult or too onerous to ask. Particularly for that property, as we've identified in our proposed conditions, that lies east of the power lines. So the power lines, in this case, happen to become kind of diagonally off of Sky Lane. So if you look at your map, you got Joseph Street, Sky Lane cuts off to the northeast, and there's a power line, a main line that cuts through the subject property. Nothing can be built underneath that, and that's as good as a physical barrier on the property that you're going to have. It's going to be there pretty much forever, and unless they bury those lines, which would be even more expense for the developer or a future owner in this case. Kicking over to the next series of conditions, and I guess for a second, our position is that there's an important distinction here between those properties west of that power line and those properties east of the power line. The applicant has identified, you've got Corbin University there. What the applicant didn't identify, and it's an important factor, is the Department of Corrections has applied for a comp plan zone change to put in a new office building on their property out in the same area. So it's not very fair or of us to argue that this area isn't changing. It is changing, but I don't think it's changing as much as Mr. Hoyt would like you to believe it is. I'm drawing in a distinction here, and it may be a small distinction, but I think it's extremely important for the Joseph Street neighbors. And that is that property to the west of that power line, we're taking the position that that's arguably could go to IC if you affirm the Planning Commission. Should it go to IC? No, but could it? Sure. It could go to IC. But should it go to IC to the east? Well, what do you take it to if you don't take it to IC? The city of Salem doesn't have a rural residential zone similar to the properties to the north. You could take it to EFU, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. Our thinking was, well, why don't you just take it to IC, but limit the density? Limit their ability to essentially develop that property until those properties to the north are brought into the city and they're more compatible with what the applicant's proposing there. And the neighbors really struggled with this concept because we didn't feel like it was right to say that the applicant couldn't develop anything on the eastern portion of their property. But giving them free rein to build anything in the IC zone is similar to allowing 3-story apartments right in Bush Park, right across from High Street, from those residences there. That's what it would be like, is you're allowing apartments to go in with a conditional use permit. And you might say, well, they have to still go through a conditional use permit and site plan, but this is the key. This is the key to the gate. You approve this zone change now, and everything else is a lot easier for them to get approved. So that's why we're making such a pitch on this. And our position is it doesn't fit to the west, or excuse me, to the east of those power lines. It doesn't. And the issue is it logical? And what the applicant's arguing is that it's logical because the zoning is currently PH, and so going from PH to IC is not a big deal. And they're also arguing that, well, you've got a lot going on out there in Salem. Okay, a lot's changed over the 40 years. I agree, a lot has. But Mill Creek is more than a mile away from this property. What the applicant conveniently ignores is the rural residential housing directly to the north, 40, 50 feet across the street of Joseph Street. I see I'm on the clock. So finally, condition 10 is a standard condition of approval that Marion County places on non-farm uses when they're being located adjacent to farm or forest operations. The applicant hasn't objected to that, and we would request on behalf of Heritage Seedling that be put into place. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to address any questions of the council at this time. Thank you.
You want to know about those apartments he's thinking about in Bush Park, don't you?
Yeah.
That's the best analogy I could come up with.
Yeah, and I figured it was not at all directed to any particular counselor.
None.
Thanks for coming down, Mr. Shipman. I have a couple questions. The first one is just an easy one, I think, or an easy answer. Where does the power line run across the subject property? Well, I went up and looked, and
I can't see it. Where is it?
I didn't have a pointer like Mr. White, but I've got a mouse.
Okay.
So here's the line, right
That's
here.
where I thought it was, so you can sort of see the strip, but okay, that's it. Okay, good. Now, here are my other questions that are a little more substantive. How do you deal with the position that what we are looking at here is a zoning change and not a specific development where you can, come up with all sorts of things that could be developed there, but that's it for a later time, assuming the zoning change is made?
I would liken this to, this is getting just more than the camel's nose under the tent, Counselor. This is getting the whole camel under the tent. I mean, you get the zone change done, and it's done. Staff will look at a conditional use permit and a site plan review a lot more differently. And in the IC zone, if you don't have restrictions with respect to what's allowed there under the zoning, and they're not written into the findings, they're not written as conditions of approval, then, I mean, what's hot right now? Multifamily's hot right now. Banks are still lending like crazy on multifamily projects. We can't get them in quick enough into Salem, and can't get them occupied quick enough into Salem. These guys got this property from Corbin on such a great price, they're going to be able to go in and start putting in apartments very quickly on that northwest end and start moving eastward. Now, if the economy stays strong, they'll continue to march eastward. And without some protections there for these neighbors that are in rural residential properties and a viable commercial farm operation, you're going to have, like I said, you're going to have 3-story apartments right there across Joseph Street, and that's not logical in relation to the existing pattern of this area at this time.
Mr. Shipman, I'm just curious on this one because it's essentially we're going to the urban growth boundary, to the city limits.
You are.
What makes this unique from Cordon Road or any other place where we abut rural areas and are trying to continue to meet our obligation for buildable land inside the city limits and meet a zero vacancy rate in our multifamily? How do you see that working then? Should we have maybe the zones described by the applicant where you do urban, rural? Is that what you're thinking?
No, but that was a very clever exhibit that they prepared.
Well, you did the Bush Park. I want to see how you do it.
Well, touche. So, I've always likened Cordon Road to the Great Wall in China.
Well, that's what this is, too, you're saying.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not.
What's the
Joseph
difference?
Street is not Cordon Road.
Okay. What is
And
it then?
if you had an application where you were trying to come in, and in this case, this is similar to Cordon Road in the sense that this is the boundary of the urban growth boundary, but on Cordon Road, if you look at it, a lot of the zoning there isn't necessarily going to be. It's not going to be multifamily. It's not going to be office parks. It is, you've got single family. You've got public uses with respect to schools. You've got private uses with churches all along that Cordon corridor. You also have a number of small farm operations that are still there that may be in the county because Cordon in that location, it's not all city limits right out to Cordon. So I would say that it's similar with respect to the fact that that's the end of the urban growth boundary, but I would say that it's very different in that you've got to look at the criteria, and the criteria says here, is it logical? And if you can make a finding and say, hey, it's logical, then the neighbors have to deal with that. But we've been jumping up and down on this point and saying we don't believe it's logical as to this area, and that's important for them.
Our planning commission did. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Shipman, you had me all along until you started to talk about how apartment buildings weren't compatible with that area. But right across the street, that triangle right there, how many stories are those apartment buildings that have been existing there for a number of years? Those 2 or 3 stories?
Across the street, where, Councilor Hoy?
In that triangle there on Deer Park and Aumsville Highway? Those are apartment buildings.
That's correct. They are
Right
essentially-
across the street from the subject property.
Yes, it is.
So I'm confused when you say that it's out of character or that it's not compatible. I'm confused.
Well, if you look to, Corbin is kind of self-contained on its own, and that's kind of on the edge of Corbin's property. Our argument is that the IC zone and multifamily uses on the western portion of the power lines, we're not objecting to that. We're not asking for any sort of rural housing in this area here or up into this, any rural housing, we're not asking for rural residential housing here whatsoever or up into here. We've acknowledged that they can put apartments in there. That can go to IC. What we're saying is that this area in here, this area east of these lines, all this area in here is not logical based on these uses. If you look over here, there's no rural residential houses over here. This is all Corbin and it's all Department of Corrections land. It's a different nature of land, a different level of impact. And that's the distinction. It's a small one, but it's very important in my mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. So a question is, you have conditions kind of laid out for residential, especially multifamily development, but I'm looking at the IC zone, and I mean, do you have conditions prepared for every potential use
No.
that could happen? Because I'm looking through it, and you could have a long-term commercial lodging, postal services, churches, repair places, recycling depots, a lab. I mean, I think it gets to the point of this land use application is not about the use of that land. It's about the zone of that land. It's not about that this is going to be apartments or this is going to be an audiovisual media production facility. So I'm curious as to, you have conditions for a very specific use, but are you prepared to provide conditions for all potential uses? And are the neighbors prepared to go there? Because we don't know what's going to be built here.
We don't. Right now, multifamily's hot, and I think everybody would acknowledge that. But what would happen, I would hope that, did you read one of the uses as being auto wrecking? Is that one of them?
Are you talking about the recycling?
Audio, visual, media production, recycling depot, data center facility.
I mean, if you had a recycling
Self-storage facility. I mean,
self-storage facility,
stuff.
there's a lot of uses that
A
could go in there.
helicopter landing area, that's my favorite one.
The helicopter
I'm sure the
landing.
neighbors would love that, helicopter landing area.
For Christmas tree harvesting, sure. We've not identified
Anderson.
all the uses there. We focus primarily on residential, because frankly, that's what's compatible with our client's property to the north and to the east.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Shipman, do you agree with Mr. Hoyt that the only contention that is left between the parties when you tried to settle this relates to condition number 8?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Thanks, Mr. Shipman, for coming down. I guess neither of you brought up the issue of the housing needs analysis that Salem did a couple years ago, but you refer to the multifamily as hot, and I submit that the multifamily is hot because of the drastic need that the city of Salem has. Maybe Marion County has all the housing they need, but the city of Salem does not. So looking at that and trying to weigh this situation with that need, does that make any difference?
I would say that Marion County is no different than the city of Salem, and they need housing as well. In this case, the staff identified the housing needs analysis, and I think that staff identified that multifamily housing is definitely identified as a need for the city of Salem. You know, if you were to make findings with respect to the housing needs analysis and how that's an important factor, you could do that in this case. Our contention is that it's still not logical with respect to what's going on to the north. And for us, again, maybe that demarcation line's getting thinner, Councilor Lewis, but it still, for the neighbors, that's all they've got.
I want to understand again which conditions you all are agreeing to, where you and the applicant agree. So would that include the condition 10, or I guess it's condition 13 and condition 15, the ones dealing with the street improvements?
Yes.
You all agree on that?
Yes.
Could I just kind of clarify that with you for just a second? It sounds to me like you all agree because the cost will be borne by the city of Salem and its taxpayers for the improvement of these roads, so why worry, you know, for both sides in that one? I'm a little concerned about it. I don't think it's been clearly explained, and you're really good at this. Maybe you could explain how this works to the benefit of the city of Salem here.
Well, here's how it works to the benefit of the city of Salem. What we've identified is, and I think staff has identified also in the public works staff in the staff report, is the area of concern, mutual concern, that I think that the developer and the city staff has is this intersection right here at Joseph and Deer Park. It's that intersection. It's not Aumsville Highway, it's not the improvement of that, and it's not the improvement of Joseph Street. And I think so that's in my mind, that's the issue, is Deer Park, Joseph Street, Aumsville Highway. It's that intersection.
That's not what this says. This, as I read it, it says along the entire frontage of Aumsville Highway, construct a 3/4 street improvement to minor arterial, that it actually is a fairly substantial improvement requirement. I understand why the applicant's kind of backing off here.
So why are the neighbors backing off?
Well, because it's great negotiating, I guess.
Well, here's the other factor. Thank you. The other factor is that they live on Joseph Street, and initially, to be honest, we came out firing on all cylinders on this. We were. The neighbors were mad as hops, and we came out hard, and we put in a ton of conditions on this thing, and that we wanted to condition the heck out of it. And then the applicant got together with a couple of the neighbors and said, hey, can we get together? Can we sit down? And we've had several meetings with Mr. Hoyt at his office, with the applicant developer, and a core group of neighbors to try to hash this out. And I think it's going in a right direction, which is they don't, initially staff was, to staff's credit, they were trying to pull the traffic, the improvements off of Joseph Street, so they essentially had the applicant develop everything off the Aumsville Highway. Okay, so that's why you've got that dedication. That's why you've got that big street improvement.
Yeah.
That's why you've got all that in
Well, that's why you also testified that Joseph Street needs either substantial improvement or something by Marion County because of the pass-through.
Well,
I'm just trying to understand this really, Mark.
Our position has changed.
Okay.
Our position's changed.
Oh.
And our position's changed because in light of the traffic that's going through there, the Joseph Street neighbors don't want that widened or improved really in any way. They want the traffic through that corridor calmed. They want it slowed down. Several have talked about potentially putting in speed bumps there because it's a problem for those neighbors. In talking with the applicant, and I could see where this is a condition of approval, that our proposed one, where Public Works would have angst. But what we felt is we took the proportionate share that in the original staff report that Public Works was looking at, and we increased it proportionately based on what we believe was the more important change at Deer Park, Joseph, and Aumsville.
But if I understand it, and again, please correct me, because this is important to the taxpayers of Salem, what's going on out here. There's still going to be 6,000 trips under any of the zone changes, as I understood it. Maybe I misunderstood how this trip factor would work, but this appears to be a situation where I wish they'd move to Aumsville Highway, or we'll try to figure out a way to impede the use, but there's still a plan for really substantial trips on Joseph, on Aumsville Highway, whatever goes on out there. What I'm trying to figure out, I want to be very cautious with agreeing to something where it sounds like people have found agreement, but I have a fiduciary responsibility to the people of Salem, not to the people of Joseph Street, although I'm very sympathetic with their problem. I'm trying to figure out who pays for what and how this all gets fixed. And you know this stuff pretty well.
Sure. I guess where I see Joseph Street getting improved in the future, I mean, if our condition of approval went in, Mayor, I think it would protect the city of Salem residents, of which I'm one, by the following. If you put that density limitation and restriction on there, they wouldn't be able to develop more housing in that area. Now, it doesn't go to Councilor Kaiser's question with respect to other uses. But what that would do is ultimately at some point, those lands north of Joseph Street could come into the city. And once they come into the city and they have the potential to be redeveloped, at that point, City of Salem staff, Marion County Public Works staff will then start imposing conditions of approval on Joseph Street, and that could change. So I don't see the public getting caught with any additional expense necessarily on Joseph Street. Aumsville Highway at this point is operating, we believe, at a acceptable level of service.
Wow.
And we felt that our proposed condition essentially put the monies where we believe the need was greatest, which was at that intersection.
Okay. Well, I'll just alert our staff. I'm going to look for some answers in terms of the city of Salem's interests in this so we understand it real clearly before we do anything. Yes, Councilor.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Shipman, I'm looking at condition 11 with the statement that you, the declaratory statement to tenants who buy or lease any residential. First question is, from where is that language taken? Is it just in accordance with the statute that you and Mr. Hoyt came up with, or is it specific language someplace in the statutes?
This is standard language that is found.
Got it. That's all.
With Marion County.
Okay, thank you. And I presume its purpose is that these people, anybody who might buy or lease, is not going to be surprised if a combine comes down the road, or a tractor, or a truck full of cattle or something like that.
Yeah, or seed.
Yeah. Okay. I understand specifically why you said seed. Yeah.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you. I had a question about condition 7 and the water system improvements that were noted. Are these current customers in the area members of the East Salem Water District? They still receive water from us? Is that correct?
On number 7?
Who's the water provider to the Joseph Street?
Am I on the wrong page?
Those, I believe the users out there are on individual wells. They're on private wells.
Okay. I'm seeing the Planning Commission's decision on number 7 to construct water facilities consistent with the Public Works Master Plan. And it looks like there would be pump station, lots of improvements along the boundary lines. So I'm looking at, if I could just have some clarification, the services that are out there are currently provided by the City of Salem, is that correct?
Well, why don't we wait and let staff, just be alerted that Councilor has a question and be ready to answer that. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Rope. Followed by Andrew Acker.
My name is Linda Roten. I live at 6226 Joseph Street Southeast. I have lived there since 1992, and we have seen changes, but nothing at this level prior to this time. This is an ideal neighborhood for those of us who love the rural residential environment. This neighborhood is a Salem treasure, a multifaceted gem. There are multiple reasons for my opposition to the proposed rezoning of 4195 Aumsville Highway. I firmly believe that the urban growth boundary is absolutely misplaced, illogical, and non-sequential. But this evening, I wish to voice my opposition based on Section 64.025 of the Code Plan Map Amendments. Property in this neighborhood has been bought and sold over many years without significant changes in the circumstances. Sale of property in an area should not and must not dictate to the existing residents. This is a community of large lot, small acreage, single-family dwellings, and farmland. There is no proven equal or better use than single-family homes and/or public open space. If you have been to our neighborhood, you know this is the character of the vicinity. And if you haven't been to our neighborhood, please come and take a look. The map shows you one thing, but it doesn't show you the character. There are no social patterns in the vicinity that have changed. There are no demographic patterns in the vicinity that have changed, and no economic patterns in the vicinity have changed. Any changes in the area are between Corden and Kubler and the DOC properties. Said changes impact our neighborhood in many ways. The subject property is significantly separated from these developments. A zoning change to IC would be neither commensurate nor compatible with the existing neighborhood. If a zoning change is warranted, select a designation that maintains the integrity of our neighborhood. Please give serious consideration to my thoughts.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right, Andrew, followed by Christopher Mead.
My name's AJ Acker. I live at 5455 Joseph Street, southeast, right up there on the hill. I'm wondering, can I show a picture
Sure.
before my time starts? Is that okay? Or is it part of the 3 minutes? Is it
Well, once you
all
get
right
the
to do
picture
that?
up, start talking.
All right. Is there a else? I figured it might be helpful for us to see a general picture of the area. And to the right is the subject property that we're talking about. And to the left is a picture of, basically to the left is going to be all the single family properties, large lot properties. And so that's kind of how it currently sits. So you kind of get an idea of what it is. And it really is country up there. I was going to focus on a couple of different things, but as the talks have gone, I'm just going to look at two different things that I don't know if it hasn't really been addressed. The Salem Comprehensive Policies Plan, doesn't that help govern how development transpires? There's a couple things that show up here. On page 31 of the Salem Comp Policies Plan, it says the location and density of residential uses shall be determined after consideration of the following factors. It says the character of existing neighborhoods based on height, bulk, and scale of existing and proposed development in the neighborhood. And what's being proposed is outside of that bulk and scale. It is much larger. It would tower, if you can imagine what's being proposed. And the reason we're focusing on residential is because that's what the applicant has in their application. They're talking about residential and apartments, and it makes sense, right? Because there is a need, and we recognize that. But what we're saying is, if we can keep that to the west and the lower portion, what we want to be able to do is keep a sense of what the neighborhood is right now up on the hill to the east of the lines. Another part of that plan, that same comp plan, says this. It says, requests for rezonings to higher density residential uses to meet identified housing needs shall be, its residential areas shall be protected from more intensive land use activity in abutting zones. And this is an abutting zone. And so we're talking about IC, which could be very intensive. And to your point, wow, it could be outside of residential. This could be a very, it could be any number of things could go on up there. But we are we're RA, zone properties here just to the north of the subject property. And we just want to have consideration in that. So we're urging you, we're coming and saying, please help us with this. We're not saying we don't believe housing is needed. We recognize that this could be a great benefit to the community, but just help us to preserve what we have up here in this neighborhood and make it compatible, because you guys have the power to do that. So thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions at all? Okay, thank you very much. Christopher Meade, followed by Mark Crampman.
Hi, I'm Christopher Meade. I am the fourth generation of my family to reside at 5765 Joseph Street Southeast, 97317. This year is the 100th anniversary of my family owning land on this hill. In that time, families have come and gone, houses have been built, torn down, renovated, rebuilt, or moved. Roads have changed from horse trails to gravel to paved roads. Wells have been drilled, plumbing moved indoors, and power lines made their way into our countryside. We have almost 100 neighbors now, most of whom live on land once owned, then traded or sold by my predecessors. A lot has changed. When our land was first acquired, there wasn't another person for miles around. The closest homes were north of modern-day Highway 22, and when I was a kid, there was nothing but fields east of Cordon Road, all the way to the Santiam Correctional Facility and Corbin College. Now, Amazon, FedEx, Home Depot, and the expansion of the training facilities at the DPSST have sprawled out to cover most of the land in between my family home and the city of Salem. A lot has changed. But I'm not here to argue that change is a bad thing. In fact, the drive to improve is always an admirable goal in my view. I'm grateful that I don't have to plow using animals or wash my clothes in a mangle. I'm grateful that I have access to information, transportation that I don't have to brush and feed from crop that I had to plant and cultivate myself, and help for any situation is only a phone call away. The hillside me and mine have called home for 100 years has changed with each successive generation for the better, and I'm not here to argue that change is the problem. I am here to argue that unbridled change without proper planning and infrastructure is the problem. Over the last year, my neighbors and I have heard every possible reason that tripling the amount of residents on our hot hillside should be fine and won't significantly impact our way of life. Our own legal counsel was shocked when we brought the matter to his attention, with other developers calling this a Hail Mary project. Comments like, what a ridiculous expansion that will cost more money than it's worth. Yet here we are, after 3 zoning hearings, where city staff did the work of the developer in what appears to be a reckless attempt to stuff high-density housing into any available space, regardless of the cost to developers and the existing residents. Our gravel road is not going to survive almost 6,000 allowed trips. Aumsville Highway is a 2-lane twisting road that has been the end of hundreds of vehicles that underestimated this danger. Our infrastructure is barely adequate for the 100 or so neighbors that currently reside there, yet reports say that tripling that number will have no significant impact. This will cause us harm, to us, to them, to our roads, our guests, our habitat, and our families, despite the misleading and disingenuous testimony of the applicant. This is why we ask you to reconsider this proposal. It's not about saying, not in my backyard. It's about doing it the right way. My family predates almost every other person on this hillside, and we have always been welcoming to newcomers. And I welcome the opportunity to have new neighbors, but not at the incredibly steep cost that doing it this way will put on those of us already there and those yet to come. I ask you to carefully reconsider your positions on this and the impact this will have on all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you for coming down. So am I understanding with your infrastructure concerns that you're wanting the improvements on Aumsville Highway in addition to Joseph Street? What are we looking at condition-wise?
We go back and forth between the neighbors on this because obviously there's a lot of us who have a lot of different ideas on this subject. What I see is that Aumsville Highway was built to calm traffic on Joseph Street. There's an upper Joseph Street and then there's the gravel lower Joseph Street. And the current situation is that now with FedEx and Amazon and now putting in another nearly 400 apartment complexes, increasing this traffic on these two barely adequate roads is going to be dangerous for everybody. Whether that takes the form of improving Aumsville and doing something to calm traffic on Joseph, I mean, I'm not an expert, I'm a teacher. I mean, I can't tell you what that would look like, but I can tell you that going from 0 people up there, because it's PH zone, but nobody lives there. There's nothing built there. There's 0 trips now. But adding 6,000 new trips is ludicrous. It doesn't make sense on what we already have.
That's the allowed zone. Yeah, I just want to make sure it's clear. The allowed zoning has 6,000 trips baked into it.
I understand, but
Okay, I
currently
just wanna
there's
make sure it's
nothing
clear.
at the property. So by building something there and saying that 6,000 extra people on those roads is okay is not the facts.
Yeah. Have you met with the county at all on this? I mean, have the commissioners had a look at your problems on Joseph Street?
Personally, no, I have not. That's why we hired the.
I just wondered, because it does, I actually made a wrong turn and ended up Joseph Street. I went out to Corbin.
Charming
I thought, well,
place,
I'll
right?
cut through on Joseph. I was one of those idiots. And it really wasn't the right street. I made a mistake. I could tell as soon as I got going good. Slow, but good.
Yep. No more than 10 miles an hour, please.
Yeah, no more than 10. No more than 10. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark Krautman and Alan Rasmussen.
Thank you, members of the City Council and Mr. Mayor. My name is Mark Krautman, 4199 75th Avenue Southeast in Salem. And although my home is, as Mr. Hoyt mentioned, I'm almost 2 miles away, my farm is adjacent to this property. It's 100 acres that my wife Jolly and I operate at the northeast corner. So we grow mostly ornamental, woody ornamental nursery stock. This 15 acres under consideration is not like any other in Salem. It's not the same as a similar amount of land that might be on the city limit boundary with Kaiser, where there might be large apartment complexes next door, gas stations, or IC zoned industrial development. The nearest apartment complexes are in fact at the corner of South Lancaster and Cordon Road, the normal city boundary, over a mile distant. Fact is, the nearest IC zone property to this 15 acres is over a half mile away at FedEx. And as people have pointed out, the neighboring properties to the west and south are institutional. We hope to simply preserve some semblance of similarity to existing neighborhood character. What is my major concern? Bluntly, existing county residents understand that this is farm country, essentially. And new residents, numbering in the hundreds, former city and urban dwellers, will harbor resentment and feel conflict with me personally and my wife and our staff for our customary and usual farm activities on the 100 acres, where we make our full-time living adjacent to the site. Examples of complaints that we've heard about include dust associated with field tillage and agricultural lime application, herbicide applications. New neighbors make it their business somehow to walk their dog on our farm, experience this wide open spaces and peaceful atmosphere, but they become offended if we apply agricultural pesticides on our property, control rodents, or their dog goes missing and they assume my pesticides killed it. A third item that they become riled up about is noise associated with our large tractors, and especially our propane cannons to scare away the geese that cover the entire corrections property and spill out onto our farm. I don't need to tell you about the danger of slow-moving farm equipment on these serpentine roads with steep drop-offs and no shoulder, especially with people that are moseying down the road with a cell phone in their face. Finally, the strong odor of chicken poop. We applied it, enriched the soil at 3 tons per acre. When it rains, it's not a happy circumstance for neighbors, but it sure makes a nice crop thereafter. Joel and I have experienced each of these complaints above and mentioned additional frequent events. I see the time, so I'll cut it short. New residents who move into the county invariably rationalize that our farm property is something like Minto Park, walk the dog, jog, take their kids for nature walks, etc. They park their cars in the evening, leave condoms and drug paraphernalia at our farm gates, or destroy the locks on our gates to steal fuel in four-wheelers. Please respect the conditions Mark Shipman has put on our objection.
Thank you.
I'll take questions.
Really, thank you very much. Is there a right to farm?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's quite liberal, actually, and
That's what I
this
thought.
is the problem.
So I can complain all I want about your bird cannon and pesticides, and
Right,
you
and
got a
we're
right to
considerate
do
with,
it 'cause it's
we're
how you
considerate
make
with
your
his neighbors, and sometimes they malfunction and they go off at night. We go over there
Yeah.
and fix them.
Yeah, I just noticed in the conditions that they sort of reiterated the right to farm statute. I certainly understand your concern. It's a pain in the neck to have a neighbor complain, but you have a right to do it.
Well, and
Somebody wants
we have an obligation, a civic obligation as county and city.
Yeah.
I mean, we spend.
I'm sure you do a good job, but
We spend $4 million a year on our business, and those employees all spend their money in Salem.
exactly, and I don't see that whatever happens out there, it affects your right to farm. I'm not sure how that would work under current statute.
Somebody you had a question?
Just a minute, I'll call on him when I'm done.
He's in charge.
I just want to hear you say you've got a right to farm.
I have a right to farm.
Okay, thanks.
Affirmed in the legislature.
Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to ask the same question. I'll ask it in a different way, but while we're doing that, could we put up, sorry, Councilor Roy, could we put up the map, the aerial map that showed the various lots? Yeah, that's good. Is your property the long, skinny one on the north? On the right-hand side?
It's the brown lot. That's one lot of our, half the farm, basically.
And also the fields, the brown fields to the right?
It's all the brown field up there.
And then is it the long, skinny property, or is that somebody else's?
No, that's off Sky Lane, I believe.
Thank you. Based on the apparent derision of the other counselors, I will not ask any question about the right to farm.
You have a right to ask questions.
Yeah, that's right.
The mayor is the applicant.
Even if they've already
I
been
just
asked
wanted to
by the
make sure it's clear. We're not.
There was a question about meeting with the county, and I just pointed out I have met with Commissioner Sam Brentano.
Yeah.
I was going to bring a copy of his letter tonight because he reaffirms that this is a very frequent problem with county activity at the urban interface, and this is going to make problems for Jolly and me. We'll manage it, but the more hundreds of people you put on that hillside, the
Wait
bigger the hassle.
till you hear their barking dogs, like I do in my neighborhood. So we all got our problems.
Thank
Go
you
ahead,
very much.
Councilor Hoy. Was it you?
No.
Any of you guys? Oh, you just objecting to Tom?
Yes.
Oh. I see now.
It was a well-taken objection, and I withdrew my question. Objection sustained.
Okay. Mr. Rasmussen.
Hello, my name is Alan Rasmussen of 382 East Cedar Street, Staten, Oregon 97383. I represent Cascade Legacy Properties along with my father Ken, my uncle Jim, and my cousin Ryan. I thank the council for your time tonight. I also want to thank the staff who has been the epitome of public servants in working with us and our foes on this project. This zone change was approved by the City Planning Commission on July 19th. As you know, it was based on pure merits and meeting all the requirements of the city zoning laws and has been affirmed by your city staff. We were originally here a month ago, but we're here tonight because some of the neighbors had, concerns that you've heard tonight about the potential changes in the surrounding area. We have been committed to being very open and accessible to these neighbors, as been referenced tonight a couple times, agreeing to postpone, even an agreement to postpone this meeting to tonight, where we spent considerable time and resources to sit down with our attorneys face to face. In the meantime, it has been a great pleasure to get to meet and know some of the neighbors like AJ, Tom, Chris, Mark, and others. Like I said, we've tried to meet many times to collaborate and find common ground on a development when it's not necessarily required of us to do so. This journey has come a long way, and all the parties involved, I think, should feel good about their efforts to try to work together and find solutions through the efforts of developer, us, the neighbors, lawyers, city staff, and their time of coming together to see if we couldn't get to a place where everybody can move forward. That effort does not end with an approval tonight. Our family is committed and has shared that commitment with the neighbors several times that extends well into the future years as this property sees transformation. Many new and revised conditions have resulted that CLP and the neighbors discussed face to face. Most all the heavy legwork of coming up with that revised conditions was done face to face. Some conditions I doubt many developers would even give thought to or surely would have agreed to. While not perfect, we have tried to address the concerns with density considerations. One thing that has not been mentioned tonight is tree preservation. They're kind of in the elbow, I'll call it, is around 2 acres. We would dedicate that as a park, leaving all those big Doug firs and oak trees. That was important to the neighbors, and we were sitting there working together and saw that could be something for a win-win for people. We look forward to the council's confirmation of the zone change tonight and moving forward on this property that will provide very well in many aspects for the city and its residents. One couple little notes I was writing as the talking was going on earlier tonight. Limiting the density will affect affordable housing, and we've tried to balance that with them, and I think we did that in giving up what could be developed on that east side to the tune of millions of dollars to try to balance that density, but that does affect affordable housing.
Your time's up. Any questions? Yes, Councilor White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming down and speaking to us in person. It's not often that we get to actually hear directly from the developer, and so it's nice to actually hear your voice, see your face, and get to ask you a few questions.
Yeah, no problem.
So we've heard some speculation about what you might be intending to do with that property. I would just like to hear from you. What is your intent at this point?
So early on, when we first met with them, the Joseph Street folks, we said we truly don't know. I'm not going to invest lots of time and energy into looking at what I could do, a specific use of the property, without knowing if I get a zone change. And with them, they kept asking that, and we're being upfront. We don't have defined plans. Now, yes, once we got to talking with them, Corbin would love to see housing on that lower part. There's plenty of city residents and people that are going to work at Amazon and FedEx and Henningsen and those places that are looking for housing. So it was obviously one of the options on the table. One could be, and why we've kind of said that the upper eastern half, kind of clarifying that it's not just has to be residential. It could be assisted living. That's a huge housing problem that is coming our way. As the boomers get older, assisted living, memory care, adult living is going to be a massive need in this community. And that could be up there. That could be at anywhere on the property. And so those are all options. The most likely could be a mix of single family and multifamily, which we came up with a row of lots, of 9 lots along Joseph Street to create another buffer. And then we've discussed even today, back and forth, of that property does slope down to Aumsville Highway, and talking about 2-story limits and 3-story limits that would feel the same for the people across Joseph Street. And so, to be honest with you, yes, some multifamily, single family, maybe some assisted living. If there was a need for some outpatient surgical or a dentist, a doctor, those are all things that could possibly happen on that property. So we haven't really locked ourselves into something, but when sitting down with them and scoping out some conditions and what they could live with to get a win-win, that's where we kind of landed.
Yes, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that answer. I appreciate hearing that. And as a baby boomer, I really appreciate you thinking of us. So, I guess my last direct question is, are you considering putting a hotel or some sort of lodging that way on that property? Not at all?
Not at all.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you. So my question related to density, I know the neighbors spoke to, and it was mentioned by both parties tonight, the power line strip down the middle. If you had an increased density availability for the property, if you could do some multifamily, whether that be duplex or whatnot, would that free up more area for park space? I know you've mentioned, and the families on Joseph Street has mentioned, we want to have some residential agriculture, which we don't currently have in our zoning plan, but larger lot sizes. If you were to do some higher density closer to the roads, it looks like you've planned for the buffer, but I've heard different things. I've heard, well, everything this side of the power line, more dense, we don't care about the other. Let's have some parks, which is allowed under the IC zone. Tell me your thoughts on that.
So park-wise, there's 2 acres there of the trees, which I mentioned, that we have said, not going to touch those trees. Create a nice, beautiful park, playground area, like some frisbee golf, whatever in there. Leave that natural state. The way you walk up and see it now would be the way you would see it after development. The 9 lots going east to west along the property line right there, when we sat down and developed those lots, those are not 4,500 square foot, 5,000 square foot lots. Those are 9,000, they're 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 square foot lots. That doesn't cross probably your plate much in development. Those type of lots, to provide similar sized lots or feel as the people on Skyline and Joseph Street. And then the rest would be, so east of the property lines and south of those lots. So in that area right there would be where we're talking about this density, where we can't quite get on the same page. And we came way down on what could be put in there and came way down to say this is what can still work, but it still leaves $7 to $9 million in today's value of sold units that we're saying goodbye to. That's fine. That doesn't even account for the cash flow if those units, if they were multifamily in there. That doesn't even account for probably another $1 to $2 million worth of cash flow for those units. And so I feel like we've really tried to work with them and provide a solution that could be palatable for everybody. I don't know if that answered your question.
It's very good.
I think so. And it's just number 8 that's the sticking point.
Okay.
It's just number 8 that's the sticking point, is that
Yeah,
right?
and at that, we're like 10%.
In the
Is that right? Like around 10% difference on the density of that one area. It's not a large disagreement in density in that one area of the property.
Great. Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thank
Very
you.
much. Okay, questions for staff? Councilor Cook.
Thank you. I'd like to ask my water question, please. Glenn?
Glenn Davis, Public Works. Yeah, the city water system serves everything inside the urban growth boundary, and then everything outside the urban growth boundary would be individual wells, so that there's no private, the suburban East Salem Water District is not out in that area.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Could you help me out on those transportation, those street questions I asked about? I want to understand the staff recommendation on those.
So I'll start with Aumsville Highway. Aumsville Highway is a minor arterial, and so right now the highway is just 2 lanes.
Mm-hmm.
The minor arterial standard is 3 lanes, which would have a turn lane and 2 lanes as well, plus bike lanes, plus sidewalks.
Okay.
So the idea of not doing improvements, you would be missing out on the sidewalks, bike lanes, and turn lanes to leave it the way it is today. And so we would not come to you with that recommendation.
And that would be a 6,000 trip per day minor arterial? Is that what we're projecting here? I'm not sure I want to make sure I understand these numbers that we were confronted with.
So the 6,000 trips per day is the reasonable worst case under that zone.
Oh, okay.
And
but
so,
you're building to that, right?
So it could hypothetically get to that high, not likely. Arterial streets carry much more than that.
Okay. So I get it. And if we took this change, we'd lose that option?
Yes.
Okay. Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief follow-up. So that change is condition number 10 that we were talking about. I'm looking at it now.
Sorry, we have two different versions. So
I'm looking
there was
at-
one that has no condition 10, and
Okay.
that should be the one that you have.
Pamela, I'm looking at, no, well, I'm looking at first the staff report on page 2, which has a condition 10, and then I'm looking at the proposed conditions, which, oh gosh, on page, I'm not sure what the page, but the second page of the red and blue that has changed condition 10. So am I correct, agreeing with the mayor, that we want condition, that it would be best, it would be the city's best interest to keep the condition 10 as in the staff report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other conditions? I realize that you gave us your best shot. Are there any others like that in here? This gets a little confusing between red and blue and what's where, and where we would be missing out on important infrastructure requirements we should be paying close attention to. Like Joseph Street. I don't hear it being covered here.
Sure. Lisa Anderson, Ogilvie, Community Development Department. So the majority of the testimony that we heard coming into the Planning Commission hearing and at the Planning Commission was to limit impacts to Joseph. So that's why all of our conditions are prohibiting driveways on Joseph and pushing the driveway to Aumsville, and then requiring more improvements on Aumsville.
So that's in the staff. Has that been removed by the applicants in some sort of negotiated?
Yes.
So
Yes. So our conditions
restore
say.
those.
Which number is that on
We
the
need to kind of
proposed?
understand how to restore these kinds of.
Well, condition number 4 originally said no driveways on Joseph Street unless you get a variance.
Okay.
And then related conditions, related conditions 11 and 12 convey what improvements would be required if a driveway is taken on Joseph. So the proposed changes on condition 4, instead of saying no driveways, say 2 driveways or 2 accesses should be on Joseph with no improvements. So what we said is don't take access from Joseph. If you do take access from Joseph, you need to improve it. It's not currently wide enough for two-way travel in many places. It doesn't have sidewalks, doesn't have, bike lanes, anything like that. It would need to be improved for safety. So I think what they're proposing is to take the access from Joseph, but do no improvements to it. So we would not recommend that the
Doing
council
that.
adopt that.
You're saying don't do that?
Don't do that.
Okay. What other?
Well, the condition, I think there was a lot of discussion about the condition about density.
About what again?
The condition on density and limiting the east side to housing. So to clarify, this zone does not permit housing, single-family or multifamily. It's not a permitted use, it's a conditional use.
Right.
So we wouldn't recommend that you put a condition limiting the use only to a use that's a conditional use, because if they cannot obtain a conditional use in the future, then there's no use that they can do on the property under the zone change. So if you are considering that condition, I would recommend that you consider saying, if it's developed for multifamily, this might be a cap on density, this might be a cap on height. I wouldn't put a condition saying you have to develop it for residential, but I see Dan moving forward, so perhaps he wants to weigh in on that.
Just 1 second, Carrie.
Just to clarify what Lisa's saying is that the neighbors and the applicant have kind of got this grand bargain where if we eliminate some of the street improvements, that lowers the cost for the applicant so they can build at a lower density. One goes with the other. We couldn't just condition the approval to say, well, you can only have low-density housing and still make them do all the improvements. You would have to do one or the other, and as staff is saying, don't give up all the street improvements and put all the traffic on Joseph, but no improvements.
Councilor Kaser.
Thank you. I think this goes to the heart of my concern, which is we're considering things that we shouldn't necessarily be considering at this hearing. We should be considering what the Planning Commission considered, which is the zoning change, the urban growth boundary declaration, I believe it's called. And there was one other piece to that, and I can't remember now from the staff report. But I am concerned that we're putting the cart before the horse here. And It's great that they were able to come together and compromise and negotiate and all that stuff, but it's like premature to when that should happen. And I'm concerned about putting conditions on something and then exactly like Lisa was saying, if they end up doing something else, then that property can be developed as nothing because we've set all these conditions on it. And that might be ultimately what the Joseph Street neighbors want, but I don't think that that's in our best interest as the city of Salem and something within our urban growth boundary. I'm concerned about us leaving property essentially unused for the sake of being unused to appease neighbors. And I want to preserve open space as much as the next person. I want to make sure that we're using our land wisely, though, within our UGB. And there's a reason why we have a UGB within the state of Oregon. So I hear what the neighbors are saying, but I think we're like 10 steps ahead of where we should be considering things right now. And that's a separate conversation.
Very good, Councilor. Thank you. Councilor McCoy.
Lisa, so I guess my question, and this, I totally agree with Councilor Kaiser. Your staff, you made the recommendation you did, and this is my understanding, because if they wanted to, if any housing, whether it was single family or multi-use, was going to be built, if we passed this zone change, there would have to be a conditional use permit. So to me, all this conversation about what you can or won't do is more applicable to a conditional use permit, and that's where that discussion should be being held, and we should come back and focus on what the purpose is here, which is the zone change, whether we're going to do it or not.
Thank you very much, Councilor.
I agree with both the councilors
Okay.
before me, but what I want to do is ask a specific question of the attorney.
Certainly.
What it seems to me as what the proposed conditions of approval that we've seen from the parties, it's, and maybe I'm wrong here, but it sort of seems like they went ahead and sort of did almost like an extrajudicial decision. We'll come up with agreement that we can agree with and then kind of ask the city to endorse it, as opposed to the city looking at this saying, we have to look at our standards and what's best for the city as a whole. Is that a proper reading of that situation?
Sure.
Okay. That's the shortest answer we've ever gotten from an attorney.
Insightful is what he meant with sure.
Yeah. And then I have one question for the staff. I'm really, I'm confused and interested in this, the city limits are outside the urban growth boundary thing on Joseph. How did that come about? Shouldn't the city limits and the urban, if at anything, well, I think they should be the same or the opposite way. So how did that happen?
I can't say how it happened. Generally, yes, the city limits are not outside the urban growth boundary. We did check the legal descriptions, and it is mapped correctly. It could have just been when a property was annexed, the legal description wasn't verified against the UGB, but it is how the property was annexed. So, yeah.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sensitive to what the councilors from Ward 1, 2, and 4 had to say, but I'm not comfortable just with just doing a zone change tonight without giving the neighbors some sort of assurance. They've done a lot of great work. They've come together. We always talk to developers about talking to the neighbors, doing a lot of good work, and it seems like they've done that and they've come to a pretty good place. How can we get to a place that'll work for the neighbors, the developer, but also for the city? I mean, it seems like there should be some middle ground in there where we can make sure that we're not taking on a burden that we don't need to be taking on, and yet the neighbors have some sort of assurance that that their agreements are going to be honored, and the developer has some something to go forward with. I have a feeling you have an idea in your head about how we can do that.
Well, thank you, Counselor, for your confidence. We did have an idea, and there's a lot of conditions that we took to the Planning Commission to try to appease the neighbors. The conditions about tree removal, extra setbacks, limiting the access on Joseph and the improvements on Joseph. We did all of that based on the 200 pages plus of testimony that we received about the impacts on Joseph Street. We don't think it's appropriate to limit the uses of this property to large residential single-family lots like what the neighbors have. This property's inside the city, it's inside the UGB. It's not what the zoning today allows. And again, the criteria is requiring us to look at the current zone and the proposed zone and compare those two. So we're not comparing vacant property versus a development, right? So if somebody came in today and wanted to build something that's allowed in the PH zone, we would have them go through probably site plan review, and we would just be looking at setbacks and height and landscaping. We wouldn't be looking at it compared to vacant property. And so when you're changing the zone, you have to see, is it equally or better suited than the current zone? And so that's what we took to Planning Commission with these conditions. And we think the IC zone is equally as suited to this property as the PH zone.
Lisa, could we, kind of following up on the counselor's question, could we also be confident that actually the neighbors and the developer have done quite a bit of really early work toward the conditional use permit process, that it could well be in part included in the amount of work they've done, that they should hang on to this? We should probably hang on to it in the file for this property as they come back to the council at a future date for conditional uses, that this may be the skeleton at least of some of those conditions?
Yes, I think so.
Would that be?
Yes.
I mean, I think they've done a lot of tremendous work, and I think they've gone, what they did was sort of like they're getting A+ because they did all this extra homework.
Right.
It wasn't part of tonight's process.
And even the improvements that are identified could be modified in the future with an actual development plan.
Okay.
But it's hard for us to evaluate like a proposed condition 9 that says in lieu of sidewalks, do a pedestrian walking path. Well, where and, you know, and
Yeah,
how is it
that's
connecting people and what are the uses that it's connecting? It's hard to evaluate that with no development plan.
Councilor Kaser.
Thank you. I completely agree with Councilor Hoy as far as, you know, I agree there's a lot of good work that's been done on part of the applicant and the neighbors. And if I'm correct, I don't think there's anything prohibiting those folks from entering into some kind of agreement among each other, something that's more formal and maybe even legal if they want to go that far to doing that. I'm not sure if the city is the appropriate vehicle to do that at this point, but I guess I would encourage them to perhaps explore crafting some type of memorandum of agreement or something like that. But yeah, I think they should definitely bring this back forward whatever they decide to develop is when they're going to actually do that.
Well, we're actually kind of deliberating, and I think we maybe want to give Mr. Hoyt a chance to. Oh, I'm sorry, Brad. You go ahead if you had questions.
Yeah, I just wanted staff to describe the processes that will come after this process regarding the conditional use. Who dictates?
I'm sorry.
And who makes those decisions? What kind of public comment periods and?
On a conditional use permit?
Uh-huh.
Oh, was that, sorry. Glenn was distracting me, I'm sorry. Those go to the hearings officer. So it's a public hearing. We send notice to everybody within 250 feet, neighborhood association. We make a staff recommendation. The hearings officer issues a decision. It's appealable to the planning commission or the council can call it up.
Okay. Counselor.
I have one more question. Sorry, I had just written it down here. And that is, when we start getting more of these cases where we have Marion County property abutting city property, do we, or does the Planning Commission consider Marion County property and its relation to city property in their deliberations? How does that work? Because that's something that one of the people testifying tonight brought up in the Salem comp plan, that we have to consider, you know, the impacts to things that are, how they're zoned now and that sort of thing. But I was wondering, you know, this is an instance of city versus Marion County that has different zoning. Mm-hmm. And how do we take that into account?
Well, we don't necessarily treat it any different because it's outside the city, because we always talk about the impacts, what are the uses, what are the potential uses. So oftentimes property around the subject property is zoned differently, right? So we will talk to the Planning Commission about what's developed there, what could be developed there. So we don't like assume there's necessarily a wall with the urban growth boundary, but we do assume that the zoning's not going to change across the UGB like it could inside this if that property was inside the city.
Yes. Councilor Anderson.
Mr. Acker suggested that we go out and look at the property, and I will tell you that I've ridden my bike out Aumsville Highway many times, and I've also ridden my bike out Joseph once until I came to the gravel, and then I decided not to use that road anymore. But I'm concerned about the condition 10 in the staff proposal. It's the one, the arterial and various improvements that have to be built and the left turn lanes. why was there not something like a right turn lane if you're coming west on Aumsville Highway and then turning right into whatever property was built? I guess I'm not as concerned about that as a bike rider, because when you're going down Aumsville Highway, you're going about as fast as the cars do, but still, that gets cars off the road. So why not a right turn lane?
Our traffic experts looked at this, and really from a vehicular safety standpoint, the lefts are a much more dangerous movement than the rights. So at the time of development, the property may have a traffic impact analysis that may look at that in more detail, but this is more of a high-level type analysis.
Okay. Mr. Hoyt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. I actually think there's a way to reconcile Councilor Hoyt's concerns, the concerns about a zone change tonight and all of that, but I don't know that I can answer or address all of some of the questions I heard and provide you what I think is the answer to that in 5 minutes. So if I get to the end and somebody wants to know what that might be, I'd welcome a question.
Start with the answer and work toward this.
A couple of things that I think we need to note for the context. One of the conditions is that there be a 2-acre park dedicated here. The power lines run essentially here. This is a 15-acre parcel. About 8 acres are east, about 7 acres are west. If you take those 2 acres out, you only have 5 acres left on the west. That's why density on the east is important to us, and that's why we can't make the 38 that the owners would like us to make work. So that's the reason for that demarcation and that difference there, because we're down to basically 5 acres at that point in time. So the Joseph Street issue, and Mayor, your concern regarding taxes, the neighbors have proposed that Joseph Street not be changed. All of our numbers, all of our analysis was based on the fact that Joseph Street would have to be improved. We believe that an entrance and an exit onto Aumsville Highway is going to be more dangerous than Joseph Street. We would prefer to enter and exit off of Joseph Street because we can get to here, this intersectional light where we're talking about putting in substantial investment to provide improvements. So the concept was that Joseph Street, from this point where one of the entrances would be, this would be the other entrance, would be improved to here. The neighbors have asked that that improvement not take place. We have no objection to that, but we thought staff might.
They do.
Maybe they do, and we agree. And so we have no problem improving this. We actually had proposed with the neighbors trying to vacate this area, but there were some neighbor objections to that. But the access would be taken here and go here. This would be backyards only, so no improvement would be required there. And that takes that Aumsville Improvement Highway off the table, which is one of the substantial savings that allows us to drop the density. Now, it's not gone. The proposal here is that the Aumsville Highway improvement would be deferred. And that means when other development or the city comes in to do that, this property would have a contribution requirement associated with that. That's an additional liability that my client's assuming as part of that process. I also kind of want to emphasize Mr. Atkinson's comments. We can't make these density reductions work without some of those conditions. Because if that Aumsville improvement is required as a 3/4 street improvement, one, if you do go out and look at the property, what you will see is it will be like some of those places in West Salem where you're on the road and it's up there. I mean, it's going to be an improvement that's really going to have a lot of not practical impact, because it's going to be a significant height elevation difference between the edge of the road and the back of a piece of property. So it's not an easy flow in terms of improvement. One of the things we've heard is that the neighboring properties are not consistent with this. Zoning is not based on neighboring properties being consistent. If it was, we'd only have one use, because each use next to it would always be inconsistent. Nor is zoning dependent on a specific proposal being made. That's the purpose of zoning. Otherwise, you just have to wait and say, what do you want to do with your property? Yeah, we think that's a good idea. That would be piecemeal zoning. You people would never sleep. You would be here every day with anybody who wanted to do something. So conceptually, that's what's being proposed here as a concept. We've worked hard with the neighbors, and let me kind of try and outline what I think that solution may be. We've asked for that zone change. We obviously would be comfortable and very pleased if you just approved it as approved by the Planning Commission. However, a lot of work has gone into this with the neighbors, and we respect their concerns, and we want to try and meet those concerns along with you. So as part of that, if it was approved in that condition, and we were allowed, as part of those approvals, to come off of Joseph Street, but required to improve this area, then the street improvements are there, the connection is there, the deferral of Aumsville Highway addresses Mayor Bennett's concern, that the taxpayers not be left with a big bag to pay for something that could have been exacted through development previously. Aumsville Highway essentially at this point goes out to make sure it doesn't go anywhere at this point in time. There's no real place that it connects to that's part of the city of Salem, and so deferring that improvement doesn't result in a significant traffic difference. So if you strike that balance, all of the conditions that are proposed by Mr. Shipman and the Joseph Street neighbors would apply universally to any use apply. And you heard me talk about that in our initial presentation. All of those conditions except number 8 would apply to any potential use. They would all take the 2 driveways off of Joseph Street. It would be there, and that would be something that would apply universally regardless. So if you approve the zone change with those conditions, those access improvements, the improvements to Joseph would all be part of it. And then the only question becomes question number 8. And one of the things I want to talk about density is this: those trees are important to the neighbors. Those trees are important to my client. They don't want to impact those things. But one of the tensions that we have is this: you can't please everyone and you can't do everything. We give up this 2-acre here to preserve a park. If we have to stay under a height cap here, you have no place to go but out. If you can go up, you can preserve and limit the size of the footprints. And parking spaces, circulation, paving, those things are all dictated by the number of units. And so if we have to stay down, we have to burn more green space. We want the ability to go up. I'm done, unless I have a question.
Any questions? All righty. Thank you very much. I'm going to close the public hearing. Councilor Nanki?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me, oh, that's because I'm in an attachment. I'm going to start this off by moving to affirm the decision of the Planning Commission.
Second.
Second by McCoy. Go ahead.
And just to discuss the motion, several of us have spoken to that as well, and it always tends to come to the what if or what will happen on a specific piece of property during this kind of a proceeding. I would hesitate to make significant modifications to conditions based on the fact that there are so many and they are so varied. Again, the applicant and neighbors could come to some other kind of an agreement. It sounds like they already have to some extent. And inside of the staff's current conditions, it talks about accessing Joseph if they do improvements. So I think we can deal with most of those issues as it moves down through the process.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Anderson.
I make an amendment to Councilor Nanki's motion, and that is that the proposed condition 11, which applies to the farm development properties, be added to the conditions in the staff report as condition number 16.
I'll second that.
All right.
The right to farm?
The right to farm, the language.
The statute?
Yeah, just
State
put it in.
law that says you have a right to
just
farm.
codify,
You want it thrown
letting
in?
the state law in.
Fine with me.
Okay.
Nothing like shooting them twice.
That's exactly
That's
right.
It's just making sure people understand.
Yeah.
Okay, make sure it's clear.
Well, then I guess I offered as a friendly amendment
No, I
to
think it
Nanki's
is,
amendment, and
yeah.
he's
I
accepted.
think he's accepting.
Yeah.
Okay, who's the second? You?
I second it.
You feeling friendly too?
No.
He accepts.
That's
That's good.
the original second.
Okay, so we put in the right to farm. Okay, further discussion. On the motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it
All
wise
those
to
in
make that as a
favor?
friendly?
Yeah.
There is no
Except
such
for-
thing as a friendly amendment.
That's what I
Okay.
thought. So,
Let's vote on that motion, on the amendment.
Yes, and I
All those in
seconded that.
favor of the amendment, tossing in the right to farm language, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion passes, McCoy's a no.
Yeah, the main motion is
That was
I'm just still thinking about how you vote no on right now.
Now we move back to the main motion.
Main motion as amended, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no.
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 Cook and Hoyer, noes. Motion passes. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to information reports. Is there anything anyone wanted to bring up under information reports tonight?
I had a question on the notice to propose.
Councilor Anderson?
I defer to Councilor Nanke, who was starting to talk anyway.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again.
I just didn't know if you were going to be buzzing past it or not.
On what?
On the notice to propose rulemaking regarding the use of a third party for fire permit reports.
Did you want some information on it?
Well, I'm just,
Niblock's here.
yeah, if I could.
Thank you for doing that, because he's really been patiently waiting for someone to
We wanted to make your time worthwhile.
Well, it depends on how I phrase my answer, whether or not I'd be happy that he stayed. No.
What would you like to know?
So right now, it costs us a lot of manpower to deal with these, and I work for a company, and we had the people come out twice a year, and they would submit them in, and I can see where staff would have an issue where we aren't 100% positive that we're getting all of them, and then if there's a problem. But it sounds like to deal with our problem, now we're going to charge these people $12 a report or $25 a year. They don't make a ton of money, so they'll pass that on to the people who are getting the inspection. So essentially, it's moving that, and we'll save how much money by doing that?
What it really does for us is our staff time is really in the maintenance of the record keeping, and there's about 8,000 businesses that have an inspection. Not all those have a cooking appliance or a fire alarm system, but as those come in, we have to manually take care of all those records. But what this company does for you is at no cost to the city. There is a $12 charge. They manage that for us. They handle the notices for delinquency. And what cities have seen, really the biggest reason for me was the more efficiency for our staff, so they could be out doing actual inspections and those types of things in businesses, was that many cities are seeing an increase in number of inspections that they don't even know are out there in the community. We don't have a business license in this community, so for us to know where all those systems are, that will step up the compliance, and that makes for a safer city. And the biggest thing really is the efficiency, and so they take care of all those things under the jurisdiction and authority, which is us, to send out those letters. And like I said, some cities have seen a huge increase in safety, reduction in false alarms, because the systems are tested and up to date, and a lot of the false alarms are created by systems that haven't been checked as periodically as they should be. So this just really ramps that up and makes us more efficient.
So just as a follow-up, no jurisdiction actually pays those fees?
No.
Rather than pushing that on to...
No, the way the this business model works is there's a fee for the service that's charged to this inspection companies. We don't go out and inspect hood and duct systems and those things. We hire alarm companies to do that. They submit the records to us. We don't have the staff to do that. What this allows is for the maintenance of those records, the record keeping, all that is in a cloud-based database system. So we're no longer handling those records. Every month we'll get a report that our deputy fire marshals will look at. They'll see which ones are delinquent, so they can keep track of those. If there's an on-site inspection we have to do, we're notified right away. For delinquency notices, they mail those out automatically. So it's really just more about efficiency, and I think in the end it's going to help us reduce false alarms and be more aware of everything that's in our community.
Counselor Cook? Did you, yeah. This one?
For the next one.
Next one, I'm sorry. Thank you, Chief.
You bet.
Everybody's okay? Counselor Cook?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to hear from our new librarian on item 6A.
Oh, great.
It's good that she's here.
Thank you for being so patient.
No problem. What specifically would you like to hear about?
I really enjoyed reading this report, and I'd love for you to talk about some of the programming that's going on right now and that happened this summer, just to
So-
do a report.
Awesome. Right now, we have just started off Banned Books Week, so we are doing a really awesome Banned Books Week reading program. So check that out. It's on our website, and we have a little form that you can check off all of the challenged books that you've read. So,
And thank you. I just want to add on that, as long as you're on banned books and challenges, I really appreciate your decision relative to their most recent challenge.
oh, well, thank you
I
very
thought
much.
that was well done. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we've got that going on, and it's really exciting. We have some displays up on that, and that one is the one that I've been the most involved in recently. But I got to scoop snow cones at the Summer Reading Club final party, and we had over 1,000 kids, as you read in the report. It was one of those days after I got done scooping the snow cones. I walked around the plaza with the police and fire and everybody out there with the kids, and I was just blown away. I had to kind of calm myself down and hold back the tears, because that is what it is all about for me. We are here in a lot of ways to help support our education system, and that is one of the ways that we do it, is by preventing summer slide with our summer reading program. And we've done it now in a way that the whole family can get involved. And we're looking at making it even better by getting some online components. Right now we're looking at Beanstack and a couple other vendors who do online summer reading programs, so we can even track, and you can log back in and see how you did this year compared to last year and all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Very good.
I really appreciate you coming down as one of the first adults on the summer reading program for adults, and whose kiddos, I think the very first year that we signed up, we ended up winning a drawing with one of our little tickets. We still have the book.
Awesome.
But we just can't say enough about the program and the important work that you do at the library. So thank you for coming down.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Stay up here because you're going to get more compliments.
Okay.
I appreciate it too. I wrote great on this report. The numbers are fantastic.
Awesome.
And I happened to be coming to have a visit at the city manager's office when the affair was going on in the Peace Plaza, and it was just, you could just feel the energy in it.
Yeah.
And that's to your credit and your staff's credit. So
Yeah.
keep up the good work.
I get to glom on to that because, the staff really worked hard, and it is really amazing what the staff and volunteers and everybody was able to pull together and to make that day just amazing.
And another program that I'm really proud of that Salem was able to achieve is the NASA Library
Yes,
Grant.
yeah.
Little known fact, the counselor from Ward 7 did in fact go to space camp in Huntsville, Alabama as a kiddo.
Yeah.
So if you could tell us how the NASA space program has helped with the library, that would be great too. Just elaborate.
So one of the things that I loved about it kind of all tied together, because we applied for the NASA grant and did all of that around the eclipse, right? But our summer reading theme was Libraries Rock. And so we were able to actually tie in science, NASA, moon rocks, all of that great stuff with the Libraries Rock theme. So, yeah, so as for the programs themselves, like I know we have a bunch of different ones, and we've got some more coming up with Salem Reads, because you've read the book. It's got it's got a little bit of a theme around space, and I keep saying astrology, but I mean astronomy. So if I do that, please excuse me. But around astronomy and science with that too. So we actually get to tie our programming in even further into the future. So that's really exciting.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you very much for being here this evening.
Oh,
really
thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
No further business. We are adjourned.